Operation Praying Mantis, the ruthless U.S. Navy response to the mining of USS Samuel B. Roberts by Iranian ships, had begun on April 18, 1988. The first lights of dawn slowly illuminated the Persian Gulf when Vietnam War-era Belknap-class destroyer USS Wainwright surged forward to carry on with her mission. The destroyer was the vanguard of the retaliation operation. Guided by the latest intelligence, Wainwright's targeting systems locked onto the Sasan oil platform. Coordinating with other ships, Wainwright's missiles rocked the platform, engulfing it in an inferno of fire and smoke. As plumes reached the sky, Wainwright swiftly changed course, ready for the next target, the Siri oil platform. Her crew unleashed a barrage that led to more devastation. Victorious, the destroyer and her crew made way for their next objective when the unexpected occurred. The small Iranian Kaman-class fast attack craft Joshan decided to challenge her in single combat, spraying the American ship with machine gun fire with the aim of taking down American sailors. USS Wainwright's response was instant. She fixed her Mark 42 gun and Harpoon missile launchers for one lethal attack. The battle between a highly advanced behemoth of steel and a David-sized Iranian ship was about to begin. USS Wainwright DLG-28 was the third U.S. Navy ship to bear the name of Civil War-era hero Commander Jonathan Mayhew Wainwright. The brave American sailor had served with distinction in engagements at Forts Jackson and St. Philip with great success before losing his life at the Battle of Galveston in 1863. Still, his legacy lived on in naval history due to his intrepid nature. The third USS Wainwright was laid down on July 2, 1962 at Bath, Maine by the Bath Iron Works Corporation and launched on April 25, 1965, sponsored by Richard W. Wainwright, as the United States prepared for direct military involvement in Vietnam. Half a year later, on January 8, 1966, she was commissioned at the Boston Naval Shipyard with Captain Robert P. Foreman in command. USS Wainwright was a Belknap-class cruiser, a class of single-ended guided missile cruisers that, unlike double-ended missile cruisers, its missile armament was only installed forward. When commissioned, the Belknap-class's main armament included a 5-inch 54 caliber Mark 42 gun mounted on the quarterdeck, and a twin-rail RIM-2 Terrier Mark 10 launcher on the foredeck with over 40 SN-2ER missiles. Wainwright's Mark 10 missile launcher could also launch 20 REUR-5 ASROC all-weather, all-sea conditions anti-submarine missiles, without an additional Mark 112 ASROC launcher. As decades passed, the armament would be revamped, including 2 Phalanx automated gun-based close-in weapon systems, 2 Mark 46 torpedo launchers, and 2 Harpoon missile launchers. The Phalanx close-in weapon system was a state-of-the-art automated defense system designed specifically for anti-ship missiles and aircraft threats. It comprised a radar-controlled Gatling gun that rapidly fired armor-piercing rounds at any upcoming threat. Wainwright's propulsion system comprised 4 1,200-pound-per-square-inch boilers, 2 geared steam turbines, and 2 shafts providing over 85,000 horsepower. This allowed the ship to reach a top speed of over 32 knots. The Belknap-class cruiser was also equipped with sophisticated AN/SPS-10 surface search radar, AN/SPS-48 3D air search radar, AN/SPS-49 2D air search radar, and 2 AN/SPG-55 Terrier missile fire control radar, providing the vessel with constant eyes in the skies and the depths below to affront any upcoming danger. Following her commission under Captain Foreman, USS Wainwright departed for her shakedown cruise, testing her missiles and sonar in the Atlantic. She fired her main gun at Culebra Island and launched several Terrier missiles. In April 1967, she transited the Panama Canal and arrived in San Diego, California, before leaving for Pearl Harbor. Wainwright then made her way across the Pacific, bound for Southeast Asia, to support the American troops fighting the communist forces in Vietnam. On June 6, 1967, USS Wainwright arrived at the Gulf of Tonkin to begin her first tour in Vietnam. She took Positive Identification Radar Advisory Zone, or PIRAZ, duties from USS Long Beach and began operating in the Gulf, maintaining visual surveillance and radar to identify hostile aircraft near the coasts. This job kept the vessel in the same spot for a long time, serving as a reference point for friendly strike aircraft flying above it, bound to attack targets ashore. USS Wainwright's duties also provided help to search and rescue helicopters, which also used her as a base for takeoff. During this time, an SAR helicopter crashed on USS Wainwright's flight deck, but damage was minimal. After these surveillance operations, the cruiser visited Sasebo and Okinawa before resuming Piraz duty in August. Wainwright's 27 days of operations finished on September 8th after she surveyed the Gulf and visited the British colony of Hong Kong for 5 days. For her third tour, Wainwright served as a screen commander for 2 aircraft carriers operating on Yankee Station and an anti-aircraft warfare command ship that supported all the units of Task Force 77. On September 28, 1967, USS Wainwright and her crew completed their final assignment in Vietnam and departed the combat zone in Southeast Asia. Starting in 1968 in Charleston, USS Wainwright swiftly transitioned to her role as a school ship for the destroyer school in Newport. After a brief return to Charleston, her operations spanned rugby match exercises to increase her readiness in the West Indies. Transiting the Panama Canal in late June 1968, months after the launch of North Vietnam's unexpected Tet Offensive, USS Wainwright visited strategic waypoints such as Pearl Harbor, Guam, and Subic Bay en route to her combat duty station in Indochina. Stationed once again on Piraz duty, Wainwright survived a typhoon and returned promptly to her post, despite the unexpected attack from Mother Nature. Relieved in mid-September, she embarked on a series of port visits, a global testament to American military might. Resuming Piraz duty in late October 1968, USS Wainwright effectively controlled the airspace over the Gulf of Tonkin. In January 1969, Wainwright began her final tour of duty as a Piraz ship, showcasing her persistence in such an important role. The voyage home took her through the Philippines, Subic Bay, and a trans-Pacific journey marked by stops in Sydney, Auckland, and Papeete. Returning to Charleston in February, she entered a period of inspections before embarking on dynamic exercises, including a presidential sea power demonstration and participation in exotic dancer and spark plug exercises. In August, she underwent her first regular overhaul at the Charleston Naval Shipyard, a testament to her enduring service in the U.S. Navy. After resuming operational status in February 1970, USS Wainwright engaged in rigorous training off the coasts of Florida and Virginia. In mid-March, she set off for the Atlantic Fleet Weapons Range near Puerto Rico, undertaking gunnery and missile exercises. In late April, Wainwright received orders to intercept 3 Haitian Coast Guard vessels fleeing an unsuccessful coup. While encountering one vessel near Guantanamo Bay, she stood guard as American officials boarded the vessels peacefully to defuse the situation. Later, Wainwright escorted the 2 remaining ships back to Guantanamo. A different mission arose in May 1970 when she set out to intercept a Soviet task group. Engaging 2 Russian ships, including a guided missile cruiser and destroyer, she witnessed the arrival of 2 submarines, an oiler and a submarine tender. Together, they entered port at Cienfuegos, Cuba, marking a significant diplomatic encounter reminiscent of the 1962 missile crisis. Following this period, Wainwright returned to Guantanamo Bay for more training. In June, she moored at Charleston for 2 months of essential upkeep and training, gearing up for her imminent deployment to the Far East as part of President Nixon's policy of Vietnamization. Embarking on her third and final deployment to Indochina in August, Wainwright transited via the Panama Canal and Pearl Harbor, arriving in Yokosuka, Japan by September 1970. Over the next 2 months, she conducted operations in Japanese waters, focusing on bilateral ASW exercises in the Sea of Japan, alongside Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force units. Periodic stops in Yokosuka and Sasebo provided moments of respite and maintenance. In early November, USS Wainwright headed to the Taiwan Strait to reach the familiar waters of the Gulf of Tonkin for her last tour of duty in Vietnam before the conflict ended. In the early hours of November 21, 1970, USS Wainwright took part in one of the greatest special operations deceptions in modern warfare to assist the Army and Air Force in rescuing American prisoners of war from Sun Tai in North Vietnam. Seaborne radar on board the USS Wainwright and the Navy's Air Traffic Control Station Red Crown would monitor all aircraft over the Gulf of Tonkin. Any ship equipped with NTDS could selectively monitor any activity in real time, with updates from each new sweep of the Wainwright's radar antenna. Over more than 2 hours, Wainwright's radar controllers tracked unprecedented numbers of blacked-out and radio-silenced Navy and Air Force aircraft that flew multiple paths overland, north of Haiphong and over the Gulf of Tonkin. These paths, or tracks, had time and altitude separations, but the aircraft crossed each other in congested locations, always paying attention to monitor coded altitude data squawked by each aircraft's IFF, or Identification Friend or Foe transmitter. Thanks to Wainwright's PIRAS coverage, the assets deployed for the operation had complete access to the entire region, from the Gulf of Tonkin to the mountains that went beyond the Black River of North Vietnam. The Navy could track aircraft in real time as they flew across the skies from one point to another. As if that was not enough, the Navy could also monitor and listen to radio frequencies from both friendly and hostile aircraft. All these data were displayed on screens that allowed the U.S. to provide timely inputs on enemy NVA responses to attacks. While the Navy and Air Force took over the skies to distract the enemy with the info provided by Wainwright, the Army launched a raiding force of 6 helicopters, 2 large support aircraft, and 5 small attack aircraft from Thailand in the early hours of November 20th, 1970, bound for the Sun Thai prison camp. The diversion conducted by the aircraft led by Wainwright was a complete success. Still, the ground operation was not triumphant at all. The Green Berets discovered the POWs had been evacuated beforehand. Nevertheless, the Sun Thai raid proved what the branches of the U.S. Armed Forces could achieve by working together, laying the groundwork for future Joint Forces operations. On November 14, 1970, Wainwright relieved USS Jouett on PIRAS Station as the American Air Coordinator in the northern part of the Gulf. Shortly after, the reliable cruiser was relieved by USS Chicago. Still, Wainwright kept the role of the coordinator ship, designated for the North SAR Station. She navigated between the North and South SAR stations for nearly a month, participating in Operation Beacon Tower in mid-December. The 3-day exercise increased the preparedness of U.S. Navy vessels in the Gulf of Tonkin against NVA air and surface threats. On December 16th, Wainwright departed the combat zone, setting course for Singapore, where she stayed to celebrate Christmas. She then headed for the Philippines, reaching Subic Bay on December 29th. Wainwright left the Philippines on January 4th, 1971, bound for Hong Kong. Following a 4-day visit, she left the British colony en route to the Gulf of Tonkin for 2 intense weeks of operations. Throughout the year, Wainwright participated in more training exercises in the Atlantic and conducted patrols in South America, the Caribbean, and Africa. In January 1972, the cruiser underwent a conversion process before a tour of the Mediterranean Sea. In December, the ship's crew visited Rota, Spain, before venturing into the Mediterranean, where she conducted anti-ship and anti-air warfare exercises with Allied vessels. While conducting these exercises in Greek waters, USS Wainwright successfully tracked, contacted, and identified 4 Soviet submarines, despite the communist efforts to evade contact with NATO vessels. After her successful European tours, Wainwright returned to the U.S. and underwent an overhaul. In March 1975, she became the first American ship to visit Romania in over 50 years. On April 18, 1988, USS Wainwright played a pivotal role in Operation Praying Mantis, a retaliatory action by U.S. Navy forces in response to the Iranian mining of USS Samuel B. Roberts. This guided missile frigate was patrolling the Persian Gulf before the incident. This mining of the U.S. ship, which occurred on April 14th, was taken as a direct threat to America's Operation Earnest Will, whose purpose was to safeguard re-flagged Kuwaiti oil tankers from Iranian attacks in the Persian Gulf. In the aftermath of the incident, U.S. Navy divers located additional mines in the vicinity, with their serial numbers linking them to those previously confiscated from the Iranian Air Force in September 1987. The American naval response was swift. An immediate counteroffensive was born to avenge USS Samuel B. Roberts, Operation Praying Mantis, which turned out to be the largest surface action for American forces since World War II ended. On April 18, 1988, a coalition of surface warships, complemented by aircraft from USS Enterprise, executed the operation. In close cooperation with 2 destroyers and the amphibious transport dock USS Trenton, Wainwright launched a coordinated strike on the Sasan and Siri oil platforms. The operation saw U.S. Marines descending onto the Sasan platform, gathering crucial intelligence and strategically disabling it. In response, Iran dispatched Baghamar speedboats to launch attacks across the Persian Gulf. An American A-6E intruder aircraft from VA-95 targeted the speedboats, sinking one and inflicting damage on several others. The intensity escalated further as Iranian Kaman-class fast attack craft Jashan challenged Wainwright. It launched a Harpoon missile, prompting Wainwright to retaliate with 4 Standard missiles. Additional strikes from USS Bagley culminated in the destruction of Jashan. The Iranian frigate Sahand then entered the fray, taking the fight to elements of another American surface group. In an exchange of missiles, Sahand was inevitably sunk against the superior naval power of the American ships, leading to another victory for U.S. Navy forces. Operation Praying Mantis resulted in the sinking of 2 Iranian warships and up to 6 armed speedboats. It also marked the first ever surface-to-surface missile engagement in U.S. Navy history. This decisive operation compelled Iran to agree to a ceasefire with Iraq later that summer, putting an end to the 8-year-long conflict between both nations. Wainwright was decommissioned on November 10, 1992, and remained in the reserve fleet for almost a decade. In June 2002, the British Royal Navy used her as a live fire target. She was struck by 2 Harpoon missiles fired from HMS Richmond. The missiles did not put her down, and Wainwright remained afloat during the night. The next day, she was struck by a spearfish torpedo fired from the submarine HMS Tireless, striking the bow. Shortly after, American aircraft made a strafing run, severely damaging her, before she was ultimately sent to the depths with explosive charges. During the last years of the Cold War, another significant conflict was brewing. As tensions rose in the Middle East in the 1980s and early 1990s, the Western world, led by the United States, prepared for the worst. It was during this time that the old but still reliable Iowa-class sister battleships Wisconsin and Missouri were brought back from stagnation and upgraded to serve in modern times. The World War II veteran ships were ready to serve just in time for Operation Desert Shield, launched after dictator Saddam Hussein stormed into Kuwait in August of 1990 and refused to capitulate. The mighty battleships would show the world what they were capable of during the now called Operation Desert Storm. As an allied Saudi commander put it after witnessing the might of the U.S. battleships against Iraqi defenses, quote, "I wish we had a battleship in our Navy." Without provocation or warning, Iraq invaded Kuwait in the early morning of August 2, 1990. A powerful force of tanks and soldiers seized the tiny, oil-rich country, and the invader troops lined up along the border with Saudi Arabia. Within a matter of days, Operation Desert Shield was launched, and American troops were sent to their allied country to protect the nation from potential attacks. On August 6th, the Security Council at the United Nations imposed financial sanctions against the perpetrators, as well as a trade embargo. In addition, the use of force by naval units in the Persian Gulf was authorized. In the words of President George Bush just 2 days later, quote, "After perhaps unparalleled international consultation and exhausting every alternative, it became necessary to take this action." Saddam Hussein had previously assured their neighboring countries that there would be no invasion, but hours later, Iraq occupied Kuwait. President Bush then declared, quote, "There is no justification whatsoever for this outrageous and brutal act of aggression." The president also claimed that acquiring territory by force and establishing puppet regimes was unacceptable. The United States vehemently pressed for the unconditional surrender of Iraq and the immediate withdrawal of their forces, as well as the restoration of Kuwait's legitimate government. Addressing a joint session of Congress, Bush warned that Hussein should not be allowed to seize control of crucial oil reserves in the region. Consequently, Allied forces in the Middle East were doubled. By late November, the Security Council set an ultimatum to Iraqi troops. If they didn't yield by January 15, 1991, the 28 Allied nations were to employ, quote, "all necessary means to expel the trespassers." Days before the evacuation deadline, U.S. Secretary of State James Baker met with the Iraqi foreign minister in Geneva, but every attempt at a peaceful resolution was futile. By January 12th, the House of Representatives and the Senate conferred the president the right to use military force. As the deadline approached and the Iraqi troops did not budge, the Allies were ready with over 800,000 soldiers, the largest air and land power assembly after World War II. Operation Desert Shield then became Operation Desert Storm. As part of the Reagan administration's program to build a 600-ship Navy, the Iowa-class sister battleships USS Wisconsin and USS Missouri were reactivated in the mid-1980s. The ships were constructed during World War II and served against the Japanese in the Pacific Theater. Wisconsin shelled enemy fortifications and screened friendly carriers while they conducted air raids against the enemy. Meanwhile, Missouri fought in the battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa, and the official surrender of the Empire of Japan was signed on it. The sister ships later served in the Korean War and were decommissioned into the mothball fleet. It would take 3 decades until they were called to action again. In 1984, Missouri underwent modernization and had her obsolete armament upgraded with the most advanced weaponry available. In addition, her 20mm and 40mm anti-aircraft guns were removed as they were of no use against new fighter jets and anti-ship missiles. Missouri was then equipped with Harpoon anti-ship missiles and Tomahawk cruise missiles, plus Phalanx close-in weapon system rotary cannons for defense. Furthermore, her radar and fire control systems were upgraded, as were her electronic warfare capabilities. 2 years later, her sister ship, Wisconsin, underwent a similar process of pre-recommissioning. But in addition to the modern missile systems, she received 8 RQ-2 Pioneer unmanned aerial vehicles. These were remotely controlled drones that would replace the helicopters she previously needed to spot for her immense 16-inch guns. After her official recommission, Wisconsin was homeported at Naval Station Norfolk, Virginia, and became the centerpiece of her own surface action group. Later on, she would conduct training in the Atlantic Ocean and off the coast of Puerto Rico. Meanwhile, her sister, Missouri, recently outfitted with 40mm grenade launchers and 25mm chain guns, participated in Operation Earnest Will. The small-caliber weapons were installed because of the imminent threat of Iranian cigarette boats harnessing Kuwaiti oil tankers in the Persian Gulf. Missouri escorted the reflagged Kuwaiti vessels and spent over 100 continuous days at sea as the centerpiece of Battle Group Echo. The battleship then returned to the United States for the Rim of the Pacific exercises with several other international navies, and even appeared in the music video for Cher's If I Could Turn Back Time before the outbreak of the Persian Gulf War. As Secretary of Defense Caspar Weinberger stated, it was a time to, quote, celebrate the rebirth of American sea power. As the January 15th deadline loomed over, Saddam Hussein prepared to counterattack. However, he believed the Allies would execute an amphibious landing with the 2 imposing American battleships off the Kuwait coast. Wisconsin had arrived in late August, and her sister Missouri 3 months later. After 40 years, the ships would serve together again. Hussein's forces were technologically advanced, and on paper looked massive and threatening. In practice, however, the Iraqi soldiers were veterans, battle-hardened from a decade-long war with Iran that had barely ended. At 1:40 a.m. on January 17, 1991, Missouri fired her first Tomahawk missile. Over the next 5 days, she would fire 27 more at Iraqi targets. Meanwhile, Wisconsin was the Tomahawk Land Attack Missile Strike Commander for the Persian Gulf and directed the sequence of launches that launched Operation Desert Storm, firing 24 Tomahawks in the first 2 days. Wisconsin was also responsible for the local anti-surface warfare coordination in the northernmost part of the Gulf, and the coalition aimed to destroy the Iraqi troops and cripple their military and civilian infrastructure. On January 29th, frigate Kurtz led Missouri to the north by using an advanced mine-avoidance sonar. During her first naval gunfire support engagement, the battleship shelled an Iraqi command and control bunker near the border with Saudi Arabia with her 16-inch guns. Then, on the night of February 3rd, Missouri bombarded the invaders' beach defenses in Kuwait and fired 112 rounds until she was relieved by her sister battleship 3 days later. Wisconsin had answered the call for gunfire support and was escorted by Nicholas. She then fired 11 shells across 19 miles and destroyed an artillery battery in South Kuwait. The following day, she used one of her drones as a spotter for the first time in combat and pounded a communications compound. She fired 24 shells in Iraqi positions, including artillery sites, missile facilities, and electronic warfare sites along the coast. In addition, she targeted naval sites and fired 50 rounds, damaging or sinking 15 Iraqi ships and destroying several piers. 2 days later, Wisconsin blasted bunkers and other sites and assaulted enemy troops near Kafji after Saudi and Qatari forces ousted the Iraqis from the city. Then, on the 11th and 12th, Missouri fired 60 more rounds off Kafji and headed to Failaka Island. By February 21st, Wisconsin had learned from one of her drones that a command post was being resupplied and launched an attack. The sisters then alternated positions, softening defenses in the coastline for a potential amphibious assault. As part of a hybrid landing feint on the 23rd, Missouri fired over 130 more rounds against the Kuwaiti shore. Attracting the attention of the enemy, the Iraqi fired 2 HY-2 Silkworm missiles back. One of them missed, and a friendly Sea Dart missile intercepted the second one from destroyer HMS Gloucester. The sisters then turned their guns to the island and supported the coalition ground offensive. The diversionary tactic sought to trick the enemy into believing there would be an amphibious invasion. When Missouri finished her shelling on Iraqi defensive positions, Wisconsin deployed her Pioneer drone and flew it low over the enemy. Then, as the frightened enemies witnessed the power of the battleship's guns, they waved white flags. The iconic moment became one of the most emblematic of the entire Gulf War. On February 25th, Missouri was involved in a minor friendly fire incident. Frigate Jarrett's Phalanx Sea Whiz automatically engaged the chaff fired by the battleship as if it was an enemy missile. Some stray rounds struck Missouri, but there were no casualties. The following day, Missouri began armistice enforcement operations. By February 28th, President Bush had ended hostilities. By then, the sister battleships had delivered over 1 million pounds of ordnance on enemy targets. Wisconsin launched her last salvo on the last gunfire support mission of the war, therefore becoming the last battleship in history to see action. The battleships returned home in late March. Soon after, as the Soviet threat collapsed, all remaining battleships were taken out of service. Wisconsin was decommissioned in late September 1991 after serving 14 years, while Missouri was decommissioned on March 31, 1992, after 16 years of service. The sister battleships received numerous awards for their service in 3 wars, and both were donated for use as museum ships, where they can be visited, remembered, and honored to this day. USS Wisconsin was one of the most powerful battleships ever developed. No enemy ship or fortification could survive a direct hit from her powerful main battery of 9 16-inch guns. After a brief but successful service in World War II, she fought again in the Pacific, but this time in Korea, against the invading communist forces. While Wisconsin, known fondly as Big Whiskey by her crew, was decimating enemy positions in Songkin, she was hit for the first time since World War II with a North Korean 155mm artillery shell. Although damage was minimal, and only 3 sailors were lightly injured, Wisconsin unleashed a full salvo of her 16-inch main battery against the small enemy emplacement. The enemy battery and its surroundings were obliterated, resulting in craters full of little more than rubble. USS Wisconsin was an Iowa-class battleship laid down in January 1941 at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. She was part of the Navy's fast battleship design, the 3rd out of 4 ships of the Iowa class, and the 2nd Navy vessel to bear the name of the 30th American state. The battleship was armed with 9 powerful 16-inch guns, split into 3 turrets, 12 5-inch guns, 20 dual-purpose Mark 12 guns, 80 L-60 guns, and 40 Oerlikon anti-aircraft cannons. The main battery of Mark 7 guns had a range of over 20 miles, while the secondary battery could fire at targets up to 10 miles away. Wisconsin's armor was between 9 and 14.5 inches thick, providing excellent protection against enemy land and naval gunfire. Additionally, the battleship was equipped with AN/SPS-49 air search radar, AN/SPS-67 surface search radar, and AN/SPQ-9 gunfire control radar. The Iowa-class battleship was 887 feet long, had a beam of 108 feet, a draft of 37 feet, and a displacement of 57,540 long tons. Wisconsin's advanced propulsion system enabled her to reach over 30 knots, granting her agility and striking power. Wisconsin was launched in December 1943 and commissioned in April 1944 under the orders of Captain Earl E. Stone. After training and trials in the Chesapeake Bay, she departed Norfolk in July 1944, bound for the British West Indies. In September, the battleship crossed the Panama Canal and reported to the Pacific Fleet in October for training exercises in Hawaii. Wisconsin was one step closer to fighting the Japanese. USS Wisconsin reached the Caroline Islands on December 9, 1944, and joined Admiral William F. Halsey's Third Fleet for the American reconquest of the Philippines. A few days later, USS Wisconsin was destroying Japanese facilities at Manila, working with the Third Fleet's Fast Carrier Task Force 38. Thanks to her help, U.S. aircraft softened up enemy defenses at Manila and destroyed over 270 Japanese fighters and 27 vessels, establishing air supremacy in the region. Task Force 38 saw this winning streak cut short on December 18th, when it was hit by Typhoon Cobra. This tropical cyclone took the lives of over 790 sailors, sinking 3 destroyers and a dozen aircraft, while severely damaging 9 warships. Wisconsin survived the weather's wrath without a scratch, leaving her able to unload her arsenal against the Japanese during operations in Luzon and Formosa, where she provided anti-aircraft support to Task Force 38. These operations lasted the first weeks of January 1945 and resulted in the loss of more than 40 Japanese ships and dozens of facilities, decimating Japanese influence in the Pacific. Wisconsin was assigned to the 5th Fleet in February, when Admiral Raymond A. Spruance relieved Admiral Halsey. She approached the shores of Tokyo with Task Force 58 on the 16th and rained hell on the Imperial Japanese troops. Task Force 58 destroyed over 320 aircraft that took to the skies and over 170 stationed on the ground, in addition to hangars and aircraft facilities around the airfield. Immediately after, Wisconsin was dispatched to Iwo Jima to provide direct fire support to the Marines bound to land on Japanese home soil on February 19th. War in the Pacific was about to turn more violent. As the Leathernecks established the beachheads in Iwo Jima, Task Force 58 was again dispatched to Tokyo to strike it and neutralize defenses at Hachino Island. In March 1945, Wisconsin ravaged Kyushu and swiftly eradicated ground targets at Okinawa with her powerful main battery, pounding artillery emplacements and pillboxes where the defenders were firmly dug in. By June, the American forces were ready to invade mainland Japan. Wisconsin kept pounding Japan with her 16-inch guns, removing oil refineries, storage facilities, and construction buildings. Japan was in flames, but the Imperial Army refused to surrender, which led to a last devastating air raid over Tokyo on August 13th, before the launch of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Wisconsin's next task was Operation Magic Carpet. Its objective was to repatriate U.S. servicemen that served in the Pacific Theater. The battleship was placed out of commission after bringing soldiers to the mainland U.S. During her brief career, she earned 5 battle stars fighting the Japanese. Still, Big Whiskey, as she was fondly nicknamed by her sailors, would not lay dormant for a long time. Another conflict was brewing in the Pacific, and Wisconsin was ready to answer the call of duty. Off to Korea. In June 1950, a sudden invasion by Communist North Korea shook South Korea, prompting the United States and the United Nations to prepare for war and counter the advancing troops. Amidst General Douglas MacArthur's efforts to recapture the South and stabilize the front, USS Wisconsin was awakened and recommissioned in March 1951. Under the command of Captain Thomas Burroughs, she embarked on her mission, having completed 2 midshipman training courses. Setting course for the Korean peninsula, Wisconsin arrived, ready to face the challenges ahead. By November 1951, she reached Japan, assuming the role of flagship for Vice Admiral H.M. Martin, commander of the 7th Fleet, and relieving her sister ship, USS New Jersey. Joining Task Force 77, Wisconsin played a vital role in providing gunfire support for the advancing Republic of Korea troops and the 1st Marine Division in the Kaesong-Kosong region. The ship's firepower wreaked havoc on enemy tanks, artillery, and bunkers. Notably, during one operation, surrounded ROK troops from the 1st Corps requested call fire support. Wisconsin responded by launching 3 star shells, illuminating the night sky with a burst of burning material. This display of incandescent light allowed friendly soldiers to repel the enemy attack. The ship repeated this tactic when supporting the 11th ROK forces in Wonsan Harbor, effectively fending off North Korean troops. As operations continued in December, Wisconsin remained committed to assisting UN troops. She targeted trenches, bunkers, command posts, and large enemy concentrations in the Kojo region. Following these engagements, the battleship underwent a brief checkup in Sasebo, Japan. Wisconsin's secondary battery proved invaluable in eliminating small enemy craft and clearing coastal defenses. In late December, she embarked on a special tour over the Korean peninsula, accompanied by Cardinal Francis Spellman to celebrate Christmas and conduct Catholic Mass for UN servicemen. In January 1952, the battleship received a great honor with the presence of South Korean President Syngman Rhee, who awarded Vice Admiral Martin with the ROK Order of the Military Merit during his visit aboard the ship. Without delay, Wisconsin returned to the fray, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Wisconsin resumed combat operations in late January and continued providing fire support for ROK divisions, Marines, and UN troops near the coast, severely reducing the combat effectiveness of the 15th North Korean Division. In February, Wisconsin was inspected by high-ranking US and ROK military officers before departing to Songjin to fix her main guns on enemy railway transports. On March 15th, Wisconsin was hit for the first time since World War II, while she destroyed a North Korean tunnel and train that left some enemy vehicles and troops trapped inside. It was a lucky hit from a 155mm gun battery that struck the shield of a starboard side 40mm gun mount. The impact lightly wounded 3 sailors and barely scratched the warship. Still, the direct hit was more than enough to provoke the wrath of the USS Wisconsin and her crew. In response, the mighty battleship fixed her 16-inch main battery on the hostile emplacement and unleashed a full salvo, obliterating the artillery piece and everything in the surroundings. Impressed by her disproportionate show of force, USS Duncan, which was nearby, was quick to signal a message to Wisconsin that said, quote, "Temper, temper." In April, Wisconsin was relieved by her sister ship Iowa and returned to the U.S., earning a 6th battle star for her service in Korea. USS Wisconsin was employed as a training ship and received an overhaul in the aftermath of the Korean War. In 1956, she collided at sea with the destroyer USS Eaton, severely damaging both vessels' bows. Wisconsin was repaired with spare parts from the incomplete USS Kentucky and decommissioned in 1986 as part of President Reagan's 600-ship Navy. For the upcoming Gulf War, Wisconsin was modified with more modern equipment. When U.S. and Allied forces stormed Iraq, Wisconsin provided fire support for Allied forces operating close to the Persian Gulf. Almost 50 years after her development, the 16-inch guns still spread terror among the enemy, decimating facilities and hostile troop concentrations. Whiskey became the last battleship in the world to see combat when the Gulf War ended. When the Soviet Union collapsed, USS Wisconsin was retired and converted into a ship museum in Norfolk, Virginia. In 1988, the Iran-Iraq War raged in the treacherous combat zones of the Persian Gulf. Amidst the chaos, no foreign ship, merchant or military, was safe. Not even U.S. Navy ships were immune. In a stunning event, the USS Samuel B. Roberts was nearly blown apart by a mysterious, unidentified naval mine. U.S. Navy explosive ordnance disposal divers scoured the area for evidence and eventually stumbled upon an astonishing truth. Serial numbers on the mines matched those from an Iranian ship stormed by Navy SEAL commandos. America vowed revenge and launched Operation Praying Mantis to knock Iran back in its place. It would be one of the largest U.S. naval surface operations since World War II. The primary mission would be to decimate Iranian naval power in the region, but the U.S. Navy also had its eyes set on an unexpected and unconventional target, one that might have even been illegal. In 1979, the pro-American Shah of Iran was overthrown in a violent revolution that resulted in the creation of the Islamic Republic of Iran, led by Grand Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. This uprising ended a close relationship the U.S. Navy had forged with the Iranian Navy and the Shah to become Cold War allies against the Soviet Union. As part of this alliance, the U.S. had supplied Iran with the latest weaponry available, including F-14 Tomcat fighters armed with Phoenix long-range air-to-air missiles, P-3 Orion ASW aircraft, and Harpoon anti-ship missiles. As if this was not enough, the Navy was about to build 4 destroyers for the Iranian Navy that were left incomplete after the uprising. These ships were often referred to as the Ayatollah or the Khomeini class. In September 1980, Iraq's dictator, Saddam Hussein, launched a large-scale military offensive into Iran to make the most out of the chaos that had engulfed Iran due to the revolution. Long-standing border disputes, territorial ambitions, and ideological differences regarding religion and politics were also reasons behind the clash between both nations. Iraq and Iran sought the upper hand by deploying numerous armies, advanced weapons, and brutal tactics to maintain or reconquer more territory. The war raged for almost a decade and began to wane in 1988 when ceasefire negotiations commenced. Trench warfare, chemical attacks, and indiscriminate bombings resulted in numerous civilian casualties, displacement, and entire cities reduced to rubble. Iran and Iraq suffered heavily, leaving behind a trail of destruction. International powers, especially the United States, played a significant role in the conflict. The US government and other Western nations, including the Soviet Union, provided Iraq with weapons, supplies, diplomatic support, intelligence sharing, and economic flow to finish off Iran. The ongoing conflict quickly spread to the Persian Gulf, where the US-trained Iranian Navy and Air Force gained the edge. In retaliation, Iraq began to attack Iranian shipping in the northern Gulf. This gave way to the tanker war. By 1987, Iran had conducted 168 attacks against merchant shipping, while Iraq had performed over 283. Soon, the entire Persian Gulf was in flames. In response, Kuwait called for international assistance to protect its tankers, which were targeted by Iranian ships and aircraft. Some tankers were allowed to employ the US flag to protect them from escalating attacks. US Navy vessels were also deployed in the Persian Gulf as part of Operation Earnest Will to escort reflagged Kuwaiti oil tankers through the Persian Gulf to protect them from being attacked by Iraqi and Iranian military personnel. Tensions between the US and Iran increased in late 1987 and 1988. Iran began to lay hundreds of minefields in the Arabian Gulf. Some tankers were struck by mines, causing international outrage and leading to the capture of the Iran Ajr, the vessel responsible for laying the mines. In early 1988, the US Navy was given more liberal rules of engagement to interfere against engagements on neutral ships, deterring possible attacks from Iran or Iraq. In February, the frigate USS Samuel B. Roberts was deployed to the Gulf to assist the US Navy task force. The frigate kept Iranian warships and aircraft away from tankers and supported secret mobile operating bases. More importantly, she kept the Iranian frigate Sabalan at bay from attacking merchant vessels. On April 14th, USS Samuel B. Roberts was returning from a successful escort when one of her lookouts spotted 3 mines ahead. The ship stopped, and Commander Paul Rinn ordered every sailor available to reach the main deck. While backing down, the vessel struck an Iranian moored contact mine. An explosion destroyed the keel, flooding the ship with over 2,000 tons of water. A massive fireball went up through the ship's deck. The crew miraculously fought the fire and cabled the superstructure together. The Iranian Sabalan showed up late at night, but kept her distance. The ship barely stayed afloat and was then towed away. 10 crewmen required medevac, but survived. This incident was enough for the US Navy. It was time to retaliate and hunt down the Iranian ships laying mines across the Persian Gulf. While Iranian and Iraqi ground troops were engaged in Al-Faw Peninsula after Saddam Hussein launched a massive counteroffensive led by the Republican Guard, the US Navy launched Operation Praying Mantis on April 18, 1988. The primary objective of Mantis was to sink the Iranian frigate Sabalan, held responsible for the damage to USS Samuel B. Roberts. The broader objective was to inflict enough damage on the Iranian Navy to deter it from laying more mines in the Arabian Gulf. Praying Mantis was the largest of 5 US Navy surface operations since World War II. Rear Admiral Anthony Less was the commander of Mantis and had Joint Task Force Middle East aboard USS Coronado under his command. The task force was supported by Battle Group Foxtrot under Rear Admiral Guy Zeller, commander Cruiser Destroyer Group 3 on USS Enterprise. Mantis began at 8 a.m. when Surface Action Group Bravo reached Iran's Sisan oil platform with a one-time warning. USS Merrill told the Iranians they had 20 minutes to abandon the platform before destroying it. Some Iranians refused and opened fire with their anti-aircraft guns. A Marine AH-1 helicopter intervened to finish off resistance and clear the area for US Marines that boarded the platform. They captured 1 prisoner, gathered intelligence, and placed explosives for detonation. Group Bravo then advanced towards the Raksh oil platform with the same objective. While on the way, SAG Bravo, which comprised USS Merrill, USS Trenton, and USS Lind McCormick, was attacked by 2 Iranian F-4 Phantoms. The attack ended abruptly, however, when Lind McCormick locked onto the aircraft with missile fire control radar. In an attempt to de-escalate, the attack on the Raksh oil platform was called off before SAG Bravo arrived at the location. Nevertheless, SAG Charlie continued their objective: destroy the Siri oil platform. After the expected warning to leave the platform, USS Wainwright, USS Simpson, and USS Bagley opened fire. One shell hit a compressed gas tank, caused a massive fireball, and took the lives of an Iranian gun crew. While the two task groups attacked the oil platforms, Iran deployed several speedboats from its naval forces and ordered them to attack any non-Iranian vessel in their path. Armed with Soviet RPGs and different types of machine guns and assault rifles, the speedboats damaged one American, one British, and one Panamanian merchant vessel. As the operation progressed, a VA-95 A6E intruder aircraft from USS Enterprise took off to engage 4 enemy speedboats. The intruder had a tough time targeting the small and fast boats, but sank one with a Rockeye cluster bomb during its second pass. The rest fled the scene. Besides the speedboats, Iran also deployed the Common-class missile patrol boat Joshan under the command of Captain Abbas Malik. Although her orders were unclear regarding what to do when faced with American ships, Joshan approached the location of Syria oil platform. The stage was set for a naval engagement. 3 hours later, the Iranian ship was detected by USS Wainwright. Captain Chandler, who commanded the vessel, knew through intelligence reports that Joshan was carrying the last Harpoon anti-ship missile on Iran's inventory. Knowing he could not engage unless fired upon, Captain Chandler broadcasted several warnings to Joshan, ordering her to turn away or face the consequences. Captain Malik answered by radio, quote, "I am doing my duty. I am in international waters and will commit no provocative attack." Joshan kept advancing toward USS Wainwright. At 13 miles, the U.S. Navy ship issued more warnings, but received no response. Instead, Joshan locked onto USS Wainwright with her fire control radar. Captain Chandler made one last warning, quote,
"Stop and abandon ship. I intend to sink you. Over."
Joshan immediately launched its last Harpoon missile at Wainwright, who fired one standard missile in surface-to-surface mode. USS Simpson, which was nearby, also opened fire. After 4 hits, Joshan's superstructure was left in critical condition, but did not sink. Miraculously, the Harpoon's missile failed to activate and passed close to Wainwright's starboard side. In the chaos, 2 enemy F-4 Phantom fighter bombers showed up, and Wainwright directly engaged them with 2 missiles. One took evasive maneuvers, and the other was left with a large hole in one wing and limped back to base. SAG Charlie then turned its attention to Joshan and finished the job. Later in the day, the Somme-class frigate Sahand engaged aircraft from USS Joseph Strauss with SAM fire. The U.S. Navy vessel retaliated with Harpoon and Skipper missiles that sank the Iranian ship after a massive explosion. Meanwhile, other Navy ships from SAG Delta approached Bandar Abbas base, from which Sabalan quickly departed. The Iranian ship was detected by an A-6 aircraft flown by Lieutenant Commander James Engler. After verifying her identity, Engler approached the enemy ship and fired a laser-guided bomb that crippled the ship, leaving her dead in the water. This marked the last engagement of Operation Praying Mantis and triggered a ceasefire. Sabalan was towed back to her base, and the U.S. task force returned to neutral waters. The only American casualty was a Marine Corps AH-1T Sea Cobra helicopter gunship that crashed near Abu Musa Island. Despite the ceasefire, the U.S. and Iran would face each other again in July 1988 during the tragic shoot-down of Iran Air Flight 655 by USS Vincennes. On the first day of the Yom Kippur War, on October 6, 1973, the Latakia naval operation unfolded. Egypt and Syria's surprise attack shook Israel. The Israeli Navy swiftly responded by dispatching missile boats armed with domestic anti-ship missiles that had not yet been battle-tested. In contrast, the Syrians, armed with battle-proven Soviet missiles, posed a threat. Israel's only hope was their innovative electronic countermeasure systems against the enemy, which had not seen actual combat either. The operation's objective was clear: thwart a potential Syrian naval strike along the Israeli Mediterranean coast by drawing Syrian vessels into open waters. In a daring move, the Israeli Navy placed its chips on the table and gambled everything on the success of a single audacious maneuver. In the autumn of 1973, the Middle East brewed with conflict. Known by various names, the Yom Kippur War, the Ramadan War, or the October War, The stage was set for a monumental clash between Israel and the Arab coalition led by Egypt and Syria. The battleground spanned the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, and even stretched to African Egypt and northern Israel. Egypt's aim was clear: secure a foothold on the eastern bank of the Suez Canal and use it as a bargaining chip for the return of the Sinai Peninsula from Israeli control. The confrontation finally began on October 6, 1973, when the Arab coalition struck Israel by surprise. The date aligned with Yom Kippur, a solemn Jewish holiday, and the 10th day of Ramadan, a Muslim month of religious observance. This unusual coincidence deepened the gravity of the conflict. As tensions escalated, global superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, joined the fray. They raced to bolster their respective allies, risking a dangerous clash in their support. The conflict's true overture unfolded as Egyptian and Syrian forces crossed ceasefire lines, breaching into the Sinai Peninsula and Golan Heights. Egypt's Operation Badr saw them traverse the Suez Canal, gaining ground in the Sinai. Simultaneously, Syrian troops mounted an aggressive offensive to retake the Golan Heights from Israeli occupation. Meanwhile, Israel prepared for a strike that would redefine naval warfare forever. In the lead-up to the war, the Israeli Navy stood as the primary force, ready to engage and secure victory right from the war's outset. Although the Israeli Army and Air Force had achieved remarkable success in the 1967 conflict, the Navy faced a challenge. The Egyptian missile boats, armed with Soviet-built weaponry, posed a formidable threat. Previously, the Israeli destroyer Eilat fell victim to Egypt's anti-ship missiles, revealing the vulnerability of the Navy's position. This incident, which resulted in the loss of 47 sailors on the Eilat, accentuated the existing perception of the Navy's lower standing within the nation's military establishment. Driven by a desire to enhance its capabilities, the Israeli Navy drew inspiration from the India-Pakistan conflict and recognized the strategic value of incorporating guided missile FBS into its arsenal. The Navy realized that small vessels with advanced missiles held a distinct advantage over larger warships like destroyers and frigates, especially in the eastern Mediterranean and the Red Sea's coastal waters. When the Yom Kippur War commenced, the Israeli Navy's assets included 14 Sa'ar-class missile boats. In contrast, Syria's naval forces comprised 3 Osa-class and 6 older Qamar-class missile boats, along with 11 torpedo boats and 2 minesweepers. The Israeli Navy meant to prevent any chance of Syria launching a naval attack along Israel's Mediterranean coast. This was part of the Latakia operation. Israel had a plan in place. They wanted to tempt the Syrian missile boats to come out and then confront them from the farthest possible distance. The Israelis hoped to overcome the threat posed by the Syrian missiles using chaff and electronic countermeasures, or ECM. The strategy for the Latakia plan involved moving in a wide arc toward the west, heading toward Cyprus, an approach aimed to avoid detection by Syrian coastal radar and to come at the enemy from an unexpected direction, the north. On the first night of conflict, October 6th, the Israeli Navy was sent to engage the Syrian missile boats stationed in port. Primarily, the Israeli Navy's anti-ship missile, the Gabriel, had never been used in a real battle before, so its effectiveness against an actual enemy target was uncertain. Additionally, the Gabriel missile only had half the range of the Syrian missiles, specifically the Soviet SSN-2 Styx. And noticeably, the Styx missile had already proven its potency by sinking an Israeli destroyer 6 years earlier. To defend against the Styx missiles, the Israelis relied on electronic countermeasures that had also never been tested in real combat. If these countermeasures failed, the Israeli boats would be vulnerable to the radar-guided Styx missiles. Despite these challenges, the Israeli forces formed a task group, arranging their ships in 2 columns, 3 ships in the open sea, and 2 closer to the shore. Thus, they headed towards the Syrian port of Latakia. But soon, a surface contact to the north appeared on their radar screens. Uncertain of its intentions, the Israelis fired warning shots. The contact responded with some gunfire. The officer in charge, Commander Michael Barkai, ordered one of the ships, the Hanit, to engage the Syrian torpedo boat after identifying her. The Syrian boat was successfully taken down by the Hanit's long-range gun. Unsure if the Syrian boat had communicated their position, the Israelis hurried towards the shore, preparing for what was to come. As they moved closer to the coast, the radar picked up another contact, about 25 kilometers northeast of their position. The Israelis launched a Gabriel missile at her, but the target managed to escape out of range. The pursuit continued, and the Israeli ship, Reshef, fired a Gabriel missile at 18 kilometers, hitting the Syrian minesweeper. However, the biggest challenge was dealing with the Styx missiles. The Israelis kept heading towards Latakia. As they neared the coast, the radar detected 3 Syrian missile boats, 1 Osa and 2 Kamars, coming to confront them. The Syrians launched their missiles from a distance, which initially put the Israelis at a disadvantage. But as the Syrian missiles approached, the Israelis deployed their chaff rockets and jamming systems. The Israeli-developed devices sent out misleading signals to confuse the incoming missiles' guidance systems. This was the first time these systems were used in actual combat. Nobody knew if they would work. Before long, the outcome was clear. The electronic defenses had worked as intended. The Styx missiles either missed or plunged harmlessly into the sea. With confidence in their tactics, the Israelis continued their approach. Their strategy was to close in stealthily, allowing the enemy to fire their missiles from afar and then deploying countermeasures as the enemy missiles drew near. Among the Syrian boats, only Osa had missiles left. She turned to face the Israeli vessels, while the other 2 Kamars rushed towards the safety of Latakia. However, the Israelis were determined. They accelerated towards the Syrian boat and fired a barrage of Gabriel missiles. Their chaff and jamming systems effectively thwarted 2 more Styx missiles. The powerful warheads of the Gabriel missiles promptly sank the enemy missile boats. Following this battle, the Syrian Navy was confined to its home ports. However, that did not mean they would surrender. Having lost 3 missile boats, the Syrian Navy decided to avoid direct sea battles with the Israeli Navy. Instead, they used their missile boats from harbor entrances to launch attacks, relying on coastal artillery for protection. Hoping to draw the Syrian boats into open combat, Barkai would lead a night attack on Syrian ports. On October 11th, Commander Barkai divided his forces into 3 groups. 2 missile boats targeted the port of Benias, another 2 aimed at the Syrian naval base at Mina al-Baida, and the remaining 3 were assigned to attack Latakia once again. During the attack, Barkai instructed his boats to activate ECM and approach their targets at high speed. The Syrian radar operators were confused, thinking they were tracking multiple groups of ships instead of just the Israeli boats. The Syrian Navy sent missile boats from Benias and Latakia to attack the perceived targets. Upon reaching Latakia, the Israelis realized that the Syrian missile boats were using foreign merchant ships as cover, launching missiles from among these ships. Despite the risk of hitting the unarmed merchant vessels, the Israeli boats were ordered to engage the Syrian boats, which led to the sinking of 2 merchant ships, 1 Japanese and 1 Greek. During the battle, one of the Israeli boats evaded a missile, and the crew managed to shoot down another. The fight lasted for nearly 2 hours. The Israeli boats maneuvered around the port, trying to dodge attacks from Syrian boats and coastal artillery. They alternated between targeting the Syrian missile boats and aiming at the oil tanks on the shore. However, the Israeli boats failed to ignite any of the oil tanks and could only confirm potential hits on 1 Osa-class and 1 Kamar-class boat. Only the attack on the port of Benias succeeded in setting the oil tanks ablaze. The Israeli Navy, once a collection of outdated ships, showed its worth during a time when even the highly regarded Air Force and Armored Corps faced challenges. Israel's creative use of chaff and radar jammers set a lasting example of how ships can defend themselves. Interestingly, even the navies of Arab nations now employ the same tactics that Israel initially developed near Latakia. Israeli achievements in missile technology have significantly impacted naval warfare, specifically in terms of offensive and defensive capabilities, particularly in coastal combat scenarios. Instead of focusing solely on ship size and artillery, the emphasis shifted to the importance of missiles and their precision in combat, highlighting their remarkable power in dominating the oceans. The Israeli-designed Gabriel missile system performed exceptionally well. It excelled at detecting small targets, and while its range was limited, it gained significant recognition in the war rooms of various countries. Taiwan, Singapore, South Africa, and others currently use this system. Moreover, this showdown also marked the beginning of a new era in naval warfare, one heavily influenced by missiles and electronic strategies. So while these naval battles might not have tipped the scales of the Yom Kippur War, they definitely launched a revolution in how battles would be fought at sea. Actions like those off the Syrian coast on October 7, 1973, solidified Israel's reputation in missile boat warfare. They joined the ranks of elite military innovators and assumed a leadership role among this prestigious group. The battle introduced a whole new way of fighting at sea. For the first time ever, fast patrol boats armed with surface-to-surface missiles were engaging in combat. And it didn't stop there. Both sides dabbled in electronic warfare techniques, using tactics like chaff and electronic jamming. To stay effective, defensive tactics became crucial. Countermeasures like chaff to confuse enemy radar, electronic jamming to disrupt communications, and radar-absorbent paint to minimize detection became essential. Ships now operated based on the first-to-see, first-to-kill principle, highlighting the critical nature of early detection and rapid response. These advancements are vital in modern naval environments, where strategies to limit enemy access and control specific areas are prevalent. Additionally, the use of over-the-horizon systems has become widespread, especially in regions like the Pacific and the Middle East, where littoral and nearby operational zones are of prime importance. In the grand scheme of the Yom Kippur War, the naval battles, and particularly the small skirmish that was the Battle of Latakia, didn't significantly influence the overall outcome. Yet they sparked a remarkable shift in maritime tactics and technology, and marked a turning point in naval warfare. It's 1965, and the Cold War verges on nuclear conflict. The Soviet Union has escalated tensions, threatening the West with annihilation. Patrolling the waters a few miles outside Washington, D.C., USS Wright comes to life as vessel and crew prepare for the unthinkable. Originally an aircraft carrier, this ship has been transformed. Its vast flight deck, once filled with fighter jets ready for combat, now hosts a forest of antennae and satellite dishes. These instruments of communication have replaced the roar of jet engines with the silent buzz of signals bouncing across the globe. A helicopter approaches, cutting through the sky with urgency. It lands smoothly on the deck, now cleared of any aircraft, but fully equipped for its new role. Out steps President John F. Kennedy, immediately greeted by the ship's commanding officer. Together, they move briskly inside, descending into the bowels of the USS Wright. In the heart of the ship, a secure room houses a bank of color-coded telephones. Each one is a direct link to a different branch of the U.S. defense network, from the Pentagon to missile silos scattered across the country. This array of phones stands ready to orchestrate a unified response to any threat. Even deeper, in the bowels of the Emergency Operations Center, there's a reinforced room shrouded in secrecy, requiring a top-secret key code to enter. Before there were doomsday planes, there were doomsday ships, created to ride out nuclear apocalypse. USS Wright was ready to do just that. With the creation of nuclear weapons at the end of World War II, the world changed forever, and soon, nations around the globe began to plan for the unthinkable, ensuring the continuity of government operations and the survival of critical figures in the case of nuclear Armageddon. For the United States, maintaining national security in the nuclear age required a sophisticated strategy. This approach was anchored in a triad of command posts: airborne, ground-based, and sea-based. Each element operated independently, yet was intricately linked to the others. Communications were a vital part of the strategic plan, ensuring uninterrupted contact for national security among 4 critical command posts. This network included 2 land-based command centers, one located within the Pentagon, another in a military bunker in Pennsylvania, and an airborne command post operated by the U.S. Air Force. However, the least publicly known yet wildly interesting component of this strategy was the National Emergency Command Post Afloat, or NECPA. For this, the Navy wanted sea-based ships set to be on constant alert and ready to assume the role of a floating White House, Pentagon equivalents, and mobile bunkers, ensuring the sea's governance and strategic military command even in the direst of times. For this, the models had to have endless communication systems, weapons, facilities, and survival capabilities installed by the best engineers and designers America had to offer. The first NECPA command ship, CC-1, was USS Northampton, codenamed Sea Ruler. Originally a heavy cruiser commissioned right after World War II, the ship was adapted and reclassified for her new role and based in Norfolk, Virginia, and within easy reach of the capital. A year after the Northampton began its NECPA role, the time came for the Navy to add a second floating White House to the fleet, and Navy top brass chose USS Wright, a Saipan-class light aircraft carrier commissioned in 1947. Throughout her initial career, USS Wright acted as a qualification carrier for training pilots, served the U.S. Sixth Fleet as the flagship for Carrier Division 14, engaged in NATO exercises with other members, most notably the British Royal Navy, and even operated off Korea and Okinawa with the 7th Fleet in the Pacific. However, in 1954, she departed Japanese waters and headed toward the west coast of the U.S., where she was decommissioned and assigned to the Pacific Reserve Fleet. But in 1962, she got the ultimate chance at a new life, when she was towed to Washington State's Puget Sound Naval Shipyard for conversion. And while her predecessor, Northampton, was only minimally upgraded for her NECPA duties since she was already due for replacement, the changes on Wright would be done with unparalleled efficiency and depth. According to official records, this extensive overhaul resulted in, quote, the most sophisticated communications platform ever placed at sea. For over a year, hundreds of workers secretly performed extreme alterations to the ship in both function and appearance. Reclassified as CC-2, USS Wright, codenamed Zenith, was recommissioned on May 11, 1963, in the midst of the Cold War, as the most important part of the National Emergency Command Post afloat. USS Wright was transformed into the ultimate doomsday vessel within a year. A significant portion of what was once the hangar deck space was redesigned into special command spaces and the extensive electronic equipment they required. And the flight deck, instead of aircraft, was now dominated by aerials, the tallest being a set of 156-foot masts. Equipped with sophisticated troposcatter antenna arrays, the largest and most powerful transmitting antenna systems ever installed on a U.S. Navy ship. A press release issued by the branch soon after Zenith entered service stated, quote, the Wright has the most extensive communications facilities ever put aboard a ship. Its voice of command can be heard by ships, aircraft, and stations throughout the world. Within the ship was a specialized room devoted solely to teletype machines, each capable of rapidly receiving messages at a rate of 100 words per minute, integral to the efficient exchange and processing of command data. Beyond these machines, the ship had the latest communications technology, including over 40 tons of gear and 60 transmitters and receivers, matching the capabilities of large shore-based communication stations. According to the Navy, this state-of-the-art communication system allowed USS Wright to set the world record for the fastest around-the-world message, taking just 0.8 of a second. However, the true power of USS Wright lay in her nuclear contingency capabilities. In case of a nuclear emergency, the President of the United States and their closest aides would be escorted by the Marine Corps into helicopters and taken into one of the 2 NECPA ships. Upon their arrival, Wright would transform into a fortress at sea. Its decks, equipped with advanced air filters, would close off, and powerful saltwater systems would cleanse the ship of any nuclear contamination. Once inside, whatever was left of the United States government and Army branches would get to work below Wright's deck, where a fully equipped operations center laid, with working spaces for up to 1,000 personnel, with rooms for war planning, charts and graphics, briefings and conferences, and more. Additionally, 17 officers and 22 enlisted personnel from the Joint Chiefs of Staff would also board to manage the floating White House in an emergency. These numbers could increase to cope with different warfare scenarios. Meanwhile, the President was provided with an elaborate stateroom akin to the Oval Office, equipped with, according to writer Garrett M. Graff, quote, nearly a dozen different color-coded telephones linked to various parts of the country's military command structure. The ship's actual armament was relatively simple. Northampton had a single aft turret, while Wright had several 40mm anti-aircraft guns. However, some rumors state that they also retained their anti-submarine warfare sensors. Under the motto Vox Imperii, or Voice of the Leaders, headed by the President, USS Wright would use all its features and advanced antenna arrays to contact 3 specialized shore facilities, ensuring a continuous link with the remaining U.S. military forces. If those stations happened to be destroyed by the enemy, Wright had a backup plan that consisted of deploying up to 3 unmanned QH-43 Husky helicopters, a unique modified version that could lift a low-frequency antenna over 2 miles into the air, which would then allow communication with Navy submarines around the globe. The operating principle behind National Emergency Command Post Afloat called for one of the TWP models to be at sea at all times, with them rotating every fortnight. In practice, the NECPA ship in active service would patrol around the eastern coast, operating within reasonable reach from the capital or close to wherever the President was. For the next 6 years, USS Wright operated out of Norfolk, Virginia, with regular overhauls that continually improved her capabilities. Both Presidents John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson spent nights aboard the Doomsday vessels during training exercises. After an overnight stay in Northampton in 1966, the latter wrote to the ship's commander regarding the program's importance, quote, "It was a great pleasure to have this opportunity to visit with you and your crew, and to see firsthand one of the finest ships and the best Navy the world has ever known. You are performing a role vital to our nation's defense, and your Commander-in-Chief is proud of you, your crew, and your ship." In mid-April 1967, USS Wright laid anchor off the coast of Uruguay, providing a worldwide state-of-the-art communications capability in support of President Johnson's attendance at the Latin American Summit Conference in Punta del Este. A year later, in May 1968, when the Guadalcanal assault ship underwent a major malfunction and was dead in the water miles south of Norfolk, Wright and her crew tracked, located, and towed the vessel nearly half the trek back before other ships arrived to help. In February 1968, when Pueblo, an American Navy intelligence ship crewed by scientists, was attacked and captured by North Korean forces, a major Cold War confrontation between the two nations ensued. With this, USS Wright, at the time in Florida, was hurriedly recalled to Norfolk to be closer to President Johnson and stood on alert as the situation de-escalated. But despite several near confrontations, a major nuclear war never came. While this was good luck for the world, it was not so for the NECPA program. Initially in their service, the Doomsday NECPA ships were the Pentagon's first choice for a nuclear strike scenario, where the survival of the president, their family, and their most important staff was paramount. Other options, like facilities on land, could easily fall target to a direct strike, while an airborne command post could only have a limited amount of time in the air before it would have to land. But the powerful floating White House could operate for weeks in the sea and offered plenty more space. Also, at the time, the Soviet Navy was barely just building up its blue water capabilities, and the United States Navy still reigned in the waters. However, in a matter of a few years, the relentless advancement of military technology posed a new challenge. At the time Northampton was first commissioned, the atomic bombs of the immediate post-war period were much less potent than those developed and tested in the late 1960s. Then, both sides of the war perfected their use of intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs, and these powerful new weapons had more destructive capabilities, reducing warning time to 15 minutes. As the end of the decade approached, advancements in Soviet spy satellites meant that the NECPA ships were no longer safe from prying enemy eyes. Whether because of satellites or sneaky shadow submarines, it became clear to the Pentagon that every minimal movement could be tracked, becoming a much easier target. And when, on April 17, 1967, the Strategic Air Command, for the first time ever, successfully used an EC-135 aircraft to launch an unmanned ICBM from its silo, this feat was a larger-than-life sign that the future of the Doomsday Command Post would be airborne. The writing for Northampton and Wright was on the wall. In the mid-1960s, the United States government considered converting the USS Triton, or a fellow Saipan-class ship like Wright, into a third NECPA model. Due to the advent of more modern technology, the National Emergency Command Post Afloat project was canceled, and the Doomsday ships, which served the United States from 1962 until 1970, were decommissioned by the United States Navy. The Pentagon's airborne prediction was correct, and today, the job of these two now long bygone ships is undertaken primarily by the U.S. Air Force's fleet of E-4B aircraft. Referred to as Doomsday planes, just like their waterborne cousins, the aircraft serve as an airborne command post that offers the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense a platform, if need be, to initiate a nuclear strike. And just like the NECPA ships, the models are equipped to support a range of other major military operations, or respond to other events like large-scale natural disasters. In service since the 1970s, the E-4B is now in the early stages of being replaced by a new program. While the model is most likely also to be based on the iconic Boeing 747 airframe, new technology, not known to civilians yet, may protect the American president better than NECPA ever could. USS Roper was closing in fast after U-85. The crew of the German submarine surfaced to disappear at top speed, desperate to survive the night of April 13, 1942. Little did the submariners know that USS Roper had radar to track them down no matter where they went. developed during World War I, Roper had been updated. The old but reliable U.S. Navy Wickes-class destroyer would not relent. As U-85 broke the waves in the pitch-black darkness, his captain felt relieved, thinking they'd make it out of the North Carolina coast. Suddenly, Roper's searchlights caught onto them. The submariners rushed to the deck gun, risking their lives as the submarine prepared to crash dive before a lethal salvo sank it. The time had come for one last stand between an old destroyer and a modern Kriegsmarine submarine. The U.S. Navy Wickes-class destroyer was developed and built between 1917 and 1919, when the country declared war against the Prussian Empire and joined the global conflict raging on in Europe. The Navy commissioned 111 vessels of the class, of which few saw actual combat operations during World War I. The destroyer class was named after Admiral Lambert Wickes, an officer during the American Revolutionary War. The destroyer design was developed to tackle the rising naval menace of submarines, providing the ultimate asset for fleet defense and convoy escort. In addition, the U.S. Navy sought to develop a design that had great speed and was easy to mass produce. The vessel's most recognizable features were its 4 smokestacks and flush deck. The Wickes class had a displacement of 1,250 tons, a length of 315 feet, a beam of 30 feet, and a draft of 9 feet. Power and propulsion comprised 4 oil-fired boilers driving geared steam turbines, generating around 24,000 shaft horsepower. The swift Wickes could achieve speeds of up to 35 knots. Armament was almost identical to the Caldwell-class vessels, including 4 4-inch 50-caliber guns employed in most Navy ships with flush deck designs. In addition, Wickes destroyers were armed with 12 21-inch torpedo tubes to launch the powerful Mark 8 torpedo and depth charge racks for anti-submarine warfare. The secondary armament comprised a single 3-inch 23-caliber anti-aircraft gun, located aft of the stern 4-inch gun. These destroyers became the backbone of the U.S. Navy's destroyer force before the beginning of World War II. Plenty of the Wickes-class destroyers would make their way to the British Royal Navy as part of the cooperation agreement signed with the U.S. in exchange for military bases. As part of the Destroyers for Bases deal signed on September 2, 1940, over 50 Wickes, Caldwell, and Clemson-class destroyers were transferred to the British to fend off the German Kriegsmarine. The Wickes-class destroyers that remained under U.S. Navy command were dispatched for combat once America joined the global conflict following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Such was the case of USS Roper, laid down in March 1918 by William Cramp & Sons of Philadelphia. Although she did not see any combat during World War I, USS Roper patrolled the Atlantic and the Mediterranean, visiting locations such as Ponta Delgada, Gibraltar, and Malta in 1919. While the victorious nations negotiated with the defeated, USS Roper became part of the Peace Commission and Relief Committee, delivering mail and passengers to and from Constantinople, Novorossiysk, and other cities in the region. Once the U.S. forces operating in Russia, as part of the Polar Bear expedition that provided military aid to the Russian Whites fighting the Communists led by Lenin, were withdrawn, USS Roper returned to the continental United States. Months later, she made her way to the Panama Canal and reached the Philippines to patrol the South China Sea. After her tour in the Pacific, USS Roper returned to San Diego, California, and was decommissioned in December 1922. Nonetheless, as tensions rose with the Empire of Japan following its aggressive expansion in the Pacific, the old and reliable Wickes-class destroyer was recommissioned in March 1930 and dispatched to the Pacific. USS Roper patrolled American continental waters from Alaska to Panama until 1937, when she transitioned to the Atlantic Fleet. When World War II broke out in September 1939, USS Roper began conducting neutrality patrols in the Atlantic. Before the U.S. entry into the global conflict, the United Kingdom and its colonies stood alone against the might of the German Third Reich. The Battle of the Atlantic initiated the clash between the Royal Navy and the German Kriegsmarine. In the case of the Kriegsmarine, the U-boat menace became Germany's best attempt at subjugating the British Isles, completely isolating the Britons from foreign supplies, especially those that came from the neutral United States. The ferocious German submarines took the world by storm with their aggressive and effective naval operations during the early years of the war. Just like they had done during the previous global conflict, the Germans had once again found a way to overcome their numerical inferiority with submarine warfare. The success of the Kriegsmarine submarine wolf packs and the impressive supplies they sank led Germany to coin the period the First Happy Time, which lasted from July to October 1940. During this period, the German submariners sank over 1.5 million tons of Allied shipping, crippling Britain from foreign help and greatly troubling the Admiralty about the nation's fate, especially British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. He would go as far as to admit during the post-war that he was truly nervous about the United Kingdom's defeat during the uncertain period of the Battle of Britain and the First Happy Time. Once Germany declared war against the United States, following Japan's Pearl Harbor attack, the wolf packs ventured further into the vast Atlantic Ocean, descending upon the east coast of the United States, from New England and the first colonies down to the state of Florida and the Gulf of Mexico. This led to the Second Happy Time, which became part of Operation Paukenschlag, or Drumbeat. The German sailors ravaged the ocean, sinking over 3.1 million tons worth of supplies and sending them to the depths between January and August 1942, further limiting the U.S. aid to Great Britain. The top brass of the U.S. Navy learned the hard way about the real threat posed by the lone hunters that roamed near the major ports of the East Coast. From obligated blackouts in ports and coastal cities to adopting the convoy system, the U.S. Navy began to adopt measures to eliminate the U-boat arm. With the deployment of more U.S. Navy assets and the adoption of the convoy system, the effectiveness of the daunting wolf packs diminished steadily. One of the multiple German submarines that patrolled the East Coast was U-85, a Type 7B submarine. First ordered in June 1938, U-85 was laid down in December 1939, launched in April 1941, and commissioned for the Atlantic in June 1941. As the successor of the Type 7A submarine, U-85 was larger, heavier, and more effective for commerce raiding. U-85 displaced over 740 tons when surfaced and 840 long tons when fully submerged. She had a length of 66.5 meters, a beam of 6.2 meters, and a draft of almost 5 meters. Type 7B submarines were powered by two MAN M6 V40-46 four-stroke, six-cylinder supercharged diesel engines that produced over 3,200 metric horsepower for use when surfaced, allowing her to reach a top speed of around 20 miles per hour. For submerged operations, U-85 employed two BBC GGUB 728 double-acting electric motors that produced 750 metric horsepower and provided her with a top speed of 9 miles per hour. Due to U-85's pressure hull of 48 meters, she could operate at depths of up to 230 meters. The submarine was armed with 5 21-inch torpedo tubes, 4 at the bow and 1 at the stern. She could carry either 14 torpedoes or 26 mines. Secondary armament comprised one 0.79-inch C-30 anti-aircraft gun and one 346-inch deck gun with over 200 rounds. The submariners of U-85 left Trondheim, Norway, in late August 1941 for her first patrol. Days later, on September 10th, she sank her first vessel, Thistleglen, off the coast of Cape Farewell, Greenland. No more ships were hunted, and U-85 docked at the U-boat pens of Saint-Nazaire in late September 1941. After a short break, U-85 left port for her second patrol, which was uneventful. The submarine's third patrol fared better. 3 days into the patrol, U-85 pursued the Empire Fusilier for over 7 hours before sinking her off the coast of St. John's, Newfoundland on February 9, 1942. In March 1942, U-85 departed for the Atlantic and sank the Norwegian freighter Christian Knutsen off the coast of New Jersey on April 10, 1942, prompting the U.S. Navy to search the region to hunt down enemy U-boats. USS Roper was one of them. U-85's hunting operation across the East Coast continued. The crew was eager to get a fourth vessel, but the U.S. Navy's fleet already heavily patrolled her area. During midnight on April 13, 1942, U-85 was looking for easy prey close to the Bodie Island lighthouse on the Outer Banks of North Carolina when she was detected by USS Roper. The American destroyer, employing a British Type 286 radar, detected U-85 at a distance of over 2,800 yards. Visibility was almost zero, but the radar guided the destroyer through the vast darkness of the ocean. A swift pursuit followed. Suddenly, when the target was within visual range, the sailors from USS Roper turned their lights to identify the threat. U-85's commander, realizing his cover was blown and there was no way to overcome the destroyer, fled as fast as possible to avoid depth charges. The only way to do that was to flee on the surface to achieve maximum speed. Taking his chances, the submariner opted for this choice after firing one torpedo from the stern tube to keep USS Roper at bay. The torpedo was fired at over 700 yards, but USS Roper managed to dodge it and continue the pursuit. At 300 yards, U-85 made a sharp turn to starboard to avoid the American vessel and continue its retreat. Still, the submariners were caught in the destroyer's searchlight beam. Realizing what was about to happen, the German sailors rushed to man their 88mm deck gun and fire at Roper. But there was little that could be done. Roper reacted faster and opened fire against the submariners. Seconds later, the 3-inch shell struck U-85. The U-boat crash-dived in a last effort to flee, but USS Roper quickly dropped a spread of 11 depth charges, finishing off the German submarine. During the hours that followed, no attempt was made to rescue the German sailors who were spotted asking for help in the water. Roper's lieutenant commander, Hamilton Howe, was concerned with the attack from another U-boat, despite none being spotted on the radar. At daylight, a PBY Catalina flying boat spotted over 30 deceased German soldiers floating in the water. They were recovered and buried in the Hampton National Cemetery in Hampton, Virginia. For their actions, Commander Howe received the Navy Cross for the sinking of U-85, turning USS Roper into the first American vessel to sink a German submarine during World War II. Today, submarine U-85 lies at less than 100 feet of water. Its hatch is displayed at the graveyard of the Atlantic Museum in Hatteras, North Carolina. Casual divers have found the resting place of U-85 as an attractive location to see a relic of the distant past. The secret Enigma machine carried by the submarines was extracted in 2003 and displayed at the Museum of Hatteras after approval from the German government. The resting place of the submarine was registered on the U.S. National Register of Historic Places in 2015. In the early hours of June 19th, aboard the USS Alabama, an atmosphere of focused vigilance pervaded. The ship, a titan of the seas, armed with a powerful array of more than 100 guns and capable of unleashing devastating 16-inch shells, was on high alert. At the heart of this anticipation was the radar team, led by Captain John Henry, along with technical officers Walter F. Lenoir Jr. and Eugene S. Pennebaker, and radar operators O'Brien and Cook, their eyes fixed on the screens of their SK-2 radar. A newly developed state-of-the-art marvel, this radar had recently been installed at sea. Suddenly, the device caught a signal, a mass of aircraft, an incredible 190 miles away. Initially dismissed as an improbable anomaly due to the vast distance, the crew's skepticism slowly turned to concern as the blips continued their steady approach. As the enemy fleet closed into 150 miles, Captain Fred D. Kirtland, understanding the severity of the situation, took decisive action. The Japanese were coming, and nobody but them knew about it. In early 1943, after rigorous training, USS Alabama, captained by Fred D. Kirtland and manned by a 2,500-strong crew, sprang into active duty. The ship was on its way to join the British Home Fleet in the North Atlantic as part of the United States Navy's contribution to the Lend-Lease policy, where America provided critical support to its allies. As part of her duties, Alabama's primary role was to protect British and Russian convoys on the dangerous Murmansk Run, a critical Arctic route used to deliver essential war materials like weapons, ammunition, and food from the UK and US to the Soviet port city. The path was one of the most perilous in all the theaters due to the harsh Arctic environment and the endless threat of German naval and air attacks. With this in mind, the ship was armed to the teeth. As a member of the South Dakota class of battleships, Alabama was explicitly designed for shore bombardment and carrier protection and had 129 guns peppered all over the ship's 680-foot length. Throughout the first half of 1943, Alabama and her valiant crew faced ice, snow, and severe weather, successfully escorting convoy after convoy through icy waters. While Allied leaders hoped the massive battleship would draw out the famed German dreadnought Tirpitz, that battle never materialized. After months of unwavering vigilance in the Atlantic, the Soviet Union officially recognized Alabama for her pivotal role in protecting their fleet, the only American ship in history to receive such an honor. Following her detachment from the home fleet on August 1st, the American ship departed for Norfolk Port in Virginia in preparation for an overhaul to serve in much warmer waters. That same month, during the overhaul, Alabama was slated to be fitted with an SK air search radar. A significant upgrade over previous systems, this new state-of-the-art update would significantly enhance the ship's long-range detection capabilities, which are pivotal in early warning and defense against aerial threats. However, due to time constraints and the need for more battleships in the Pacific theater, plans of fitting this radar in Pearl Harbor were delayed. Instead, Captain Fred Kirtland had the equipment loaded aboard, with plans to install it in the water. Perched high on the mast, the radar pedestal of the USS Alabama was situated about 130 feet above the water's surface, giving it a commanding view of the surrounding sea. The mast, extending even higher by an additional 30 feet, elevated the radar system to a total height of approximately 160 feet. Installing this radar, especially on water, would be no easy feat. In sheer determination, Alabama's crewmen, alongside their counterparts from a nearby repair shop, undertook a daunting task, usually reserved for the heavy machinery of Navy yard cranes. Together, they dismantled the ship's original air search radar and meticulously installed and calibrated the new advanced radar system while navigating the open waters. This decision by Captain Kirtland would save many lives down the line. Once installed, USS Alabama plunged into Pacific combat, safeguarding carrier task forces during the Gilbert Islands landings. In December, the battleship bombarded Nauru and then escorted carriers back to Afate, sustaining damage en route. Following repairs, Alabama joined Task Group 58-2 in January 1944. February saw Alabama defending carriers against Truk, but tragedy struck when a friendly fire incident resulted in casualties. The ship then supported strikes in the Caroline Islands and General MacArthur's New Guinea landings. By May 1944, the war in the Pacific was reaching an all-time high, and USS Alabama and the rest of Task Force 58 were preparing for a major operation in the Pacific, the Marianas Campaign, a critical part of the Allies' strategy to advance toward Japan by capturing key islands. The U.S. fleet, notably including Task Force 58, was a powerful assembly of naval power, comprising 15 fleet carriers, 7 battleships, and numerous cruisers, destroyers, and submarines. On June 13th, Alabama's guns roared in a pre-invasion bombardment of Saipan, marking the beginning of an intense confrontation as American forces initiated their assault on the Japanese-held Mariana Islands. Anticipating this move, the Imperial Japanese Navy, led by Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, rallied its combined fleet to mount a powerful counterattack against Admiral Raymond A. Spruance's U.S. Fifth Fleet. On the morning of June 19th, Alabama's radar officer, Captain John Henry, the 2 radar technical officers, Walter F. Lenoir Jr. and Eugene S. Pennebaker, and the 2 radar operators on watch that morning, O'Brien and Cook, were on high alert. Suddenly, Alabama's SK-2 radar detected what seemed like a large force of enemy aircraft at a distance of approximately 190 miles. Initially, due to the significant distance, the men believed this detection was nothing more than an anomaly. As the distance between the approaching aircraft and the ships closed to 150 miles, the radar crew continued to track it. Despite the men's skepticism, Captain Kirtland realized the gravity of the situation, officially validated the report, and alerted the rest of the ships. The confirmation of Alabama's report came when a fellow battleship in Task Force 58, Iowa, also detected the approaching aircraft, removing any remaining doubt about the initial spotting. Quickly, one by one, all the ships in the fleet began to pick up on the bogies as well. This early warning from Alabama allowed the U.S. Navy fleet, particularly the carriers and aircraft of Task Force 58, to prepare and position themselves effectively for the impending aerial assault. The skies above the Philippine Sea were filled with the deafening roar of engines, the endless booming of anti-aircraft guns from below, and the machine gun fire from above. The Battle of the Philippine Sea, as it later became known, witnessed fierce dogfights as U.S. Navy pilots, with superior training and tactics, engaged the Japanese aircraft. The chaos in the clouds resulted in a staggering loss of Japanese aircraft, with the Empire losing nearly 500 aircraft and many experienced pilots, forcing them into desperate kamikaze fights in the war's later stages. In contrast, American losses were minimal, with only around 30 aircraft lost. The ease with which the American pilots shot down their Japanese counterparts led to the battle being nicknamed the Marianas Turkey Shoot, a term typically used to describe an event where targets are easily and abundantly taken down. The success of this encounter marked a turning point in the Pacific War, demonstrating the effectiveness of American naval aviation and signaling the beginning of the end for Japanese naval power in the region. While the success of this battle can be attributed to many factors, the early radar warning from the men aboard USS Alabama cannot be overstated. Vice Admiral Willis A. Ching Lee Jr., commander of Task Group 58-7, sent a memo to his men that read, quote, "In the matter of reporting initial bogeys, to Iowa, well done. To Alabama, very well done." For their actions, Radar Officer Henry, the 2 radar technical officers, Lenoir and Pennebaker, and the 2 radar operators on watch that morning, O'Brien and Cook, received commendations for their performance. The exceptional and timely teamwork by the battleship also led to a direct message from Rear Admiral Edward Hansen, commander of Battleship Division 9, who told Captain Kirtland, quote, "Congratulations to you, your ship, and especially to your Super Alert radar crew. You were in large measure responsible for yesterday's superlative air victory. Southwest Corner was getting hot yesterday. Your help is greatly appreciated." A new leader, Captain Vincent R. Murphy, took command in August 1944, and Alabama resumed operations in the Pacific for the remainder of the war. During the fall, she saw a lot of action at different islands, including Okinawa, Luzon, and Surigao Strait, during the larger Battle of Leyte Gulf, and later during the liberation of the Philippines, this time as a member of Task Force 38. In December 1944, a powerful typhoon caused the battleship to roll in excess of 30 degrees, and that winter, Captain Murphy announced that after 2 very successful years at sea, Alabama would be heading to the mainland for much-needed repairs. Sailing for Pearl Harbor the following April, Alabama, this time with the new captain, William B. Goggins, headed to the shores of Okinawa, where its actions to support the U.S. landing forces with protective firepower earned her a battle star. As the Allied forces inched closer and closer to the Japanese mainland, Alabama was scoring heavy damage against Tokyo's industrial regions and earning another battle star. When the Empire finally surrendered on August 15, 1945, USS Alabama sent a detachment of Marines to land in Japan as part of the occupation forces. Alabama also helped escort the American fleet into Tokyo Bay, where Japanese officials formally signed their surrender to the Allies aboard USS Missouri on September 2nd. As World War II came to a close, USS Alabama played a key role in Operation Magic Carpet, an unprecedented air and sea operation. This massive endeavor focused on the complex task of bringing home 8 million American servicemen stationed across 4 continents. Alongside a fleet of aircraft carriers, destroyers, and other battleships, Alabama stepped up to meet this final and monumental challenge, and the now so-called heroine of the Pacific returned approximately 3,700 veterans to the home front. During her short but very busy operational lifespan, Alabama traveled over 218,000 miles, shot down 22 enemy aircraft, and earned an impressive 9 battle stars, all in the South Pacific. On January 9, 1947, Alabama sailed to Bremerton, where she was decommissioned. But the story of this iconic ship was not over yet. In the spring of 1962, when the U.S. Navy announced their plans to scrap the vessel, Alabama citizens asked permission to berth the ship and turn it into a memorial to honor and remember all state citizens who had died in defense of the United States. It took several months to tow the 35,000-ton battleship from Bremerton down the west coast and toward Alabama. Navigating the Panama Canal with mere inches to spare, the 108-foot-wide USS Alabama arrived in Mobile to a rousing hero's welcome on September 14, 1964. Subsequently, the battleship was relocated to the newly established USS Alabama Battleship Memorial Park, opened to the public for tours on January 9, 1965. Also in the 1960s, efforts began to recognize the impact of the early warning from Alabama's radar, with retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Stevens Croom of the USS Alabama Battleship Commission at the helm. Despite receiving inconclusive responses from historical authorities of the 1970s, Croom's efforts continued. Decades later, in 2001, new inquiries at the Naval Historical Center validated Alabama's role through action reports and war diaries, citing it as the first to detect Japanese aircraft during the Battle of the Philippine Sea. This confirmation was further supported by the recollections of radar operators Cook and O'Brien in 2002. Even decades after the war, Cook and O'Brien vividly remembered the tension of that fateful morning, recalling the initial skepticism and apprehensive wait for confirmation, which were, quote, some of the longest minutes of our lives. This enduring memory highlights their crucial role in a moment that shifted the tides of warfare in the Pacific. In the stillness of the Sunda Strait, on February 28, 1942, the Japanese cruiser Mogami stood guard over a fleet of 50 transports at Bantam Bay, where a deceptive calm hung over the waters. Suddenly, USS Houston and HMAS Perth, navigating through the darkness, unknowingly veered towards the Japanese fleet. Their unexpected arrival shattered the calm as they stumbled upon the transports. The Allied ships quickly unleashed a fierce onslaught, lighting up the night with the thunder of artillery. The Japanese transports wailed the alarm, summoning reinforcements. Mogami and her sister ship, Mikuma, hurtled into the heart of the maelstrom, accompanied by a fleet of warships. Mogami launched a deadly salvo of 6 torpedoes and scored 5 hits, each taking a ship to the depths. But not all of them bore Allied colors. General Hitoshi Imamura had been on board the transport Ryujo Maru when it was hit, and had spent 20 minutes in the water waiting to be rescued. As Commander Shukichi Toshikawa from Mogami approached Imamura's chief of staff to explain and make amends for the friendly fire incident, the aide's response was, quote, "Don't tell General Imamura. He thinks the American cruiser Houston did it. Let her have the credit." Mogami had survived the night, but its luck would only get worse. The Mogami-class cruisers were a unique and innovative response to the constraints of the 1930 London Naval Treaty, which imposed strict limits on the tonnage of cruisers, destroyers, and submarines for the United States, Great Britain, and Japan. Launched in 1934, the Mogami-class cruisers, led by the flagship Mogami, defied convention by pushing the maximum limits allowed by the treaty, leading them to be designed as vessels capable of transformation into heavy cruisers. Mogami was armed with advanced weaponry, including dual-purpose 15.5cm 60 naval guns and later 20cm 50 naval guns, complemented by smaller guns and a fearsome array of torpedoes. These cruisers also incorporated innovative materials and engineering, using electric welding and aluminum to save weight. With a displacement of 13,440 tons and new geared impulse turbine engines, they could reach 35 knots and had 2 balanced rudders for maneuverability. Despite initial technical problems, the Mogami-class cruisers underwent costly rebuilding, emerging as powerful warships with speed, armor protection, and heavy armament. What set Mogami apart was its attention to crew comfort, providing air conditioning, steel tube bunks, cold water fountains, and even pickle lockers believed to boost crew efficiency. It was perhaps the pickles that led to Mogami's ill fortune. Mogami, part of Cruiser Division 7 with sister ships Mikuma, Kumano, and Suzuyo, faced early setbacks due to typhoon damage and welding issues that warped her bow, leading to disarmament and extensive reconstruction, not to mention a reputation as an unlucky vessel. Despite her infamy, Mogami played roles in key wartime operations, from the occupation of French Indochina and the Japanese invasion of Malaya to the landings in Java, Borneo, and Sumatra in February 1942. However, Mogami first found herself in the thick of the action during the Sunda Strait battle. Tasked with covering the Japanese landing at Bantam Bay in Java, she encountered some 50 Japanese transports unloading troops. At 11 p.m. on February 28, 1942, USS Houston, an American heavy cruiser, and HMAS Perth, an Australian light cruiser fleeing Java through the strait, stumbled upon the scene and launched a furious barrage of shells at the exposed targets. The Japanese transports, along with their escort, the destroyer Fubuki, urgently called for reinforcements. Mogami and her sister ship Mikuma raced to respond, joined by the light cruiser Natori and a fleet of 10 destroyers. Mogami wasted no time and fired a spread of 6 torpedoes at the Allied ships, scoring multiple hits that sank 5 vessels. Tragically, among the casualties were Japanese Army landing ships and the Navy minesweeper W-2. As the battle raged on, Houston and Perth soon found themselves surrounded by relentless barrages of shells and torpedoes. Perth succumbed first. Houston held on a little longer, but eventually succumbed as well. Seaman William F. Stafford's call to abandon ship marked the end for USS Houston, the ghost of the Sunda Strait, as she slipped beneath the waves with her battle flag still flying. Mogami continued her wartime service in the Indian Ocean in April 1942, sinking Norwegian cargo ships. Part of Rear Admiral Takeo Kurita's Cruiser Division 7, Mogami was tasked with a nighttime bombardment of the American-held atoll at Midway to support a Japanese invasion. However, on June 4th, the Japanese carrier force suffered a devastating ambush by American forces, leading to a crippling loss. Despite this setback, the decision was made to proceed with the bombardment mission the following evening. As the cruisers steamed homeward under dim moonlight on June 5th, they encountered USS Tambor, a surfaced American submarine. Panic ensued, and Mogami's navigator, Lieutenant Masaki Yamauchi, attempted to correct their course, but made a critical error, causing Mogami to collide with the cruiser Mikuma. The collision resulted in extensive damage to both ships, with Mikuma suffering a ruptured fuel tank and Mogami having 40 feet of her bow crumpled in. Lieutenant Masayushi Sarawatari, Mogami's damage control officer, quickly organized efforts to patch up the damage and jettison explosives and inflammables overboard. Rear Admiral Kurita detached Mikuma and the destroyers to escort the battered Mogami while he hurried to rendezvous with the main fleet. Although the damage control team's efforts saved Mogami from sinking, the cruiser could only manage a speed of 12 knots, and Mikuma was leaking oil. Making matters worse, unbeknownst to the Japanese, USS Tambor had already reported her position. The message eventually reached Rear Admiral Raymond J. Spruance, commander of the U.S. fleet off Midway. The American response was swift. Patrol planes were dispatched to locate the enemy. By morning, they had spotted what they believed to be 2 battleships, heavily damaged and leaking oil. Midway sent a squadron of Marine Vought SB-2U Vindicator dive bombers to attack. Though they scored no hits, the Japanese flak set one of the American planes on fire, leading to a collision with Mikuma's aft turret. The battle intensified as B-17 bombers and dive bombers from the carriers Enterprise and Hornet joined the fray. They believed Mikuma to be a battleship and relentlessly targeted her. The result was devastating, with Mikuma's skipper, Captain Shokao Sakayama, among the casualties. Mogami also felt the brunt of the American assault, with her No. 5 turret punched out, torpedo tubes damaged, and fires raging below decks. Amidst the chaos and destruction, Mogami's damage control officer, Sarawatari, witnessed the horror of a bomb plunging through the seaplane deck and igniting a fire that engulfed the sickbay, claiming the lives of wounded personnel trapped inside. The situation was dire, and Sarawatari ordered the damaged compartment sealed off, leading to further casualties. As the relentless American attacks continued, Mikuma was eventually abandoned and sank, while Mogami, battered and burned, managed to escape. The cruiser owed its survival to Sarawatari's determined damage control efforts. After 5 weeks of repair work, Mogami was made seaworthy once more and sailed to safety. After rejoining Cruiser Division 7 on June 8, 1942, Mogami underwent repairs in Truk. On June 20th, Rear Admiral Shoji Nishimura took command of Cruiser Division 7, which was transferred to the 3rd Fleet. Mogami then underwent a major conversion at Sasebo Naval Arsenal, transforming into an aircraft cruiser to enhance fleet reconnaissance capabilities. This overhaul involved removing turrets, modifying magazines, extending the aft deck, and installing aircraft facilities and radar. Despite the absence of new aircraft, Mogami continued her mission. She faced minor damage from a collision with the oiler Toa Maru on May 22, 1943. Mogami departed for Truk on July 9th. The convoy repelled an attack by USS Tenosa. From August to November, she engaged in sorties from Truk and later joined Cruiser Divisions 4, 7, and 8 in the Solomon Islands. On November 5, 1943, Mogami was hit by a bomb from USS Saratoga's SPD Dauntless dive bomber at Rabaul, resulting in a fire and casualties. Once more, Mogami underwent repairs in Truk, after which she returned to Japan for further upgrades before returning to her duties. During the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Mogami was hindered by material shortages and only played a minor role along with the 5 seaplanes she carried. Subsequently, Mogami was stationed at Lingpa Roads near Borneo, guarding vital oil stocks. In October 1944, as American forces invaded the Philippines, Mogami joined Vice Admiral Shoji Nishimura's efforts to counterattack. Codenamed Sho Ichigo, the Japanese plan aimed to divert American carriers with a carrier demonstration while battleships struck American transports. Nishimura's squadron, including the aged battleships Fuso and Yamashiro, Mogami, and 4 destroyers, ventured forth, followed by Rear Admiral Kiyohide Shima's squadron. American carriers USS Enterprise and USS Lexington launched airstrikes, alerting the Japanese to their presence. However, Rear Admiral Jesse Oldendorf blocked their path in Surigao Strait, deploying PT boats, destroyers, 6 battleships, 4 heavy cruisers and 4 light cruisers. On October 25, 1944, Nishimura's force entered Surigao Strait, encountering early skirmishes with PT boats and destroyers. Amidst the confusion, Mogami was momentarily mistaken for an enemy ship, resulting in tragic friendly fire casualties. Nevertheless, the Japanese formation regrouped and continued north. At 2:58 a.m., the Americans launched a devastating torpedo attack, severely damaging Fuso and 2 destroyers. Undeterred, Nishimura pressed forward with Yamashiro and Mogami, dodging American torpedoes. However, an hour later, they confronted the American battle line, facing the full force of Oldendorf's firepower. On Mogami, the American barrage was perceived as distant flashes, followed by the ominous whistling and hissing of incoming shells. While most of the American shells were aimed at the Japanese battleship Yamashiro, Mogami used the opportunity to expose her torpedo tubes. However, American destroyers Daly and Batch spotted Mogami approaching the illuminated destroyer Hutchins, causing confusion about the identity of the approaching ships. As a result, Mogami sustained multiple hits, damaging key areas like her mainmast, radio rooms, and anti-aircraft mounts. Despite the damage, Mogami attempted to launch torpedoes, but faced relentless fire from American cruisers, led by Admiral Oldendorf himself. Hits knocked out one of her turrets, causing smoke to fill the engine room and necessitating an evacuation. A debate ensued on Mogami's bridge, with Captain Ryo Toma favoring withdrawal, while his officers, driven by the Bushido spirit, were determined to press on. Ultimately, Mogami reversed course and headed north, but continued to suffer damage from American fire. At 4:02 a.m., 3 shells from the cruiser Portland struck Mogami, causing significant casualties, including Captain Toma. In the chaos that followed, Chief Petty Officer Suichi Yamamoto took command, called for manual steering, and led the ship's withdrawal. Mogami continued to sustain damage, losing engine rooms and power. The Battle of Surigao Strait ended as a significant American victory, with Japan suffering heavy losses, including the sinking of the battleship Yamashiro. Mogami and the destroyer Shigure were among the few Japanese vessels left afloat, but as they withdrew, they collided with Admiral Shima's ships, including the cruiser Nachi. This collision caused damage to both ships, and control shifted to the gunnery officer on Mogami's bridge. Japanese officers, including torpedo officer Kokichi Mori, advised against continuing forward, fearing an American trap. Admiral Shima, aboard his damaged flagship Nachi, and contemplating the disastrous state of his fleet, particularly the battered cruiser Mogami, ordered a slow retreat at 4:41 a.m. The situation aboard Mogami was perilous, with damage from the collision and fires. The crew struggled to control the fires, even jettisoning torpedoes to prevent further explosions. Despite extreme concerns, the cruiser's main engine continued to run, and they used hand steering to maneuver. The pursuing American forces sank the destroyer Asagumo and prepared to shell the retreating Japanese fleet. At 5:29 a.m., the Americans opened fire on Mogami. Despite taking several direct hits and being engulfed in flames, Mogami maintained a speed of 14 knots. As Shima's fleet moved into the Mindanao Sea, they encountered PT boats that harassed them with torpedoes. Trying to avoid any more attacks, they even mistook bamboo poles for American submarine periscopes. An American air attack followed, with incorrect identification of Japanese cruisers as battleships due to their massive superstructures. American aircraft attacked, causing casualties and more damage to Mogami. Another wave of aircraft targeted the cruiser, bringing it to a halt. American bombs ignited a fierce blaze in the cruiser's oil tanks. Despite efforts to prevent a catastrophic explosion, Mogami had to be abandoned. Akebono, a destroyer, assisted in rescuing survivors, but eventually a torpedo sank Mogami, with only a fraction of the crew surviving. Nachi managed to reach Manila, but was later sunk during an American airstrike, resulting in significant loss of life. Mogami experienced a tragic and emblematic series of misfortunes. Her ill-fated journey culminated in her encounter with USS Chanticleer's divers in Manila Bay. This encounter revealed a symbolic humiliation for Mogami, as the divers recovered Vice Admiral Shima's flag from the wreck of the cruiser Nachi, marking the only instance in World War II where an enemy admiral's flag was taken from a warship at sea. In the port of Aden, Yemen, USS Cole was nearing dock for what seemed like a routine refueling. Out of nowhere, a small boat laden with explosives made a beeline for the ship, tearing a 40 by 40 foot hole in its all-steel hull. Designed from the keel up with a focus on survivability, Cole's features were put to the ultimate test as the crew fought to keep their ship afloat. The guided missile destroyer USS Cole is one of the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers commissioned in 1991 to serve as the backbone of the U.S. fleet. After decades of service, many believe this pioneering guided missile destroyer was gearing up for decommissioning as it neared its projected 35-year service cap by 2026. However, far from retiring, the Arleigh Burke class is slated for a new chapter of maritime dominance, extending its service life well into the next decade. Destroyers are arguably one of the most essential vessels in a nation's navy. They protect the fleet from enemy threats, and particularly in the U.S. Navy, act as the primary shield for aircraft carriers. During World War II, destroyers were instrumental to the American fleet, serving as versatile powerhouses involved in numerous operations. Ships like the Fletcher class performed essential convoy escorts, submarine warfare, naval engagements, kamikaze defense, and more. At its peak, the Navy had 377 destroyers fighting simultaneously in waters all over the world. However, following the war's end, destroyers became much less common. In the 1980s, when rising Soviet naval capabilities in submarine warfare became a considerable concern, the U.S. Navy perceived the need for a new destroyer class. To replace older destroyers and to synergize with the Ticonderoga-class cruisers, Navy designers set their sights on creating the world's most advanced destroyer. During the development, the designers applied what the Royal Navy had learned during the Falklands campaign, where, despite their technological edge, British ships faced significant challenges, struggling against Argentine aircraft and their effective anti-ship missiles, leading to the loss of one destroyer. The result was the Arleigh Burke class. While U.S. Navy ships often bear the names of famous battles, notable locations, or distinguished individuals, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers uniquely honor naval officers and sailors awarded the Navy Cross. This tradition began with its namesake, Admiral Arleigh Burke, a World War II and Korean War veteran. One of the largest American destroyer classes ever built, depending on the model, Arleigh Burkes have an overall height of almost 500 feet and a displacement of almost 9,000 tons. Employing four General Electric LM2500 gas turbines, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers can achieve over 30-knot speeds in open seas. The Arleigh Burke-class military vessels are the most powerful ships of the U.S. fleet, ready to defend the carrier strike groups against any possible threat. This is because the class is one of the first U.S. Navy ships to be designed from the keel up with a focus on survivability. They incorporate considerable redundancy in vital systems, ensuring the ship can continue to operate even after taking damage. This includes features like dividing the machinery spaces to prevent a single hit from disabling multiple systems. The design features, such as all-steel construction and extensive armor, ensure they are highly resilient against anti-ship missile threats. The Burke class was one of the earliest classes to integrate advanced computer technology for command and control, weaponry, and sensors. This allowed for a much reduced crew compared to older vessels of similar size. Arleigh Burke was also the first modern destroyer designed with features meant to lower its radar cross-section, which improves a ship's ability to evade radar detection. These destroyers are versatile and intended for a multitude of missions. They can handle anti-aircraft, anti-submarine, and anti-surface warfare. At the heart of the class since its inception is the Aegis combat system. This advanced radar not only tracks multiple targets simultaneously, but is also robustly fortified against electronic warfare attacks. Additionally, they possess advanced sonar systems, adept at detecting and countering enemy submarines. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyers are equipped with a series of nearly 100 vertical launching systems, or VLS, that can house a variety of missile types. Rounding off their armament, the primary gun on these destroyers is the 5-inch Mk-45 naval gun system. Paired with an advanced targeting mechanism, this gun can discharge up to 20 rounds a minute, reaching targets over 13 nautical miles away. The first Arleigh Burke-class destroyer's development kicked off in 1988, and by 1991, the flagship of her class was dutifully serving the U.S. Navy. Since her commissioning, this pioneering vessel has sailed in various waters, spanning the Mediterranean, Adriatic, Red Sea, Black Sea, and Persian Gulf. Rapidly, dozens of Arleigh Burke-class destroyers graced the seas, marking them as the most prolific destroyer class within the U.S. Navy's impressive fleet. Their sheer numbers and capabilities positioned the class as an undeniable cornerstone of the United States Navy's surface operations. Engineered for adaptability, she can operate autonomously or dovetail with carrier strike groups, surface action groups, amphibious ready groups, and underway replenishment groups. Flight 1 Arleigh Burkes championed the foundational design for the entire class. Between 1997 and 2000, Flight 2 variants upheld many characteristics of Flight 1, but parted ways with the tactical towed array sonar system. Launched in 2000, Flight 2A introduced notable enhancements, especially the inclusion of helicopter hangars. This adjustment enabled her to support MH-60R Seahawk helicopters, enriching her prowess in anti-submarine warfare operations. Moreover, this flight incorporated a remote-controlled system honed for detecting and classifying undersea mines. That very year marked a sobering chapter when the Arleigh Burke class encountered its first significant trial. On October 12, 2000, USS Cole, named in honor of World War II Marine Sergeant Darrell S. Cole, steadily approached the Yemeni port of Aden for what seemed like routine refueling. Without warning, a small, unassuming fiberglass boat closed in on the port side of the destroyer. Though the crew initially mistook it for a benign garbage collection boat, common in many ports worldwide, this vessel concealed a dangerous secret. It was brimming with explosives. As it nestled against USS Cole, the attackers unleashed their devastating payload, igniting the explosives against the destroyer's hull. The force of the explosion tore a 40 by 40 foot hole in the ship's side, swiftly inundating compartments and crippling crucial systems, sending shockwaves of turmoil throughout the vessel. Amidst the swirling chaos, Commander Kirk Lippold wasted no time. He immediately called for a medical evacuation. Injured crew members were swiftly airlifted, with crucial assistance from French aircraft. The remaining crew members rallied on the ship, fighting against the odds, working relentlessly to salvage what remained and keep their vessel afloat. The blast's toll was grim. 17 valiant sailors were tragically lost, and 39 others bore the scars of the unexpected onslaught. Soon after, investigators raced against the clock, and the United States government soon pointed the finger at Al-Qaeda. This audacious assault on USS Cole, a mere 11 months before the horrors of 9/11, was a disquieting prelude to the terror group's deep-seated ambitions and their chilling prowess. Though battered and scarred, USS Cole stood resilient. She soon journeyed back to her anchor in Norfolk, Virginia. A demanding period of repair followed when Cole, under the hands of a determined crew and a brigade of dedicated engineers, began her painstaking rebirth. 14 months of unyielding effort later, USS Cole was reborn, now embarking on a new and improved chapter in her service. The once beleaguered Cole remains in service as of 2023. Following the 9/11 attacks, the Arleigh Burke class enhanced its role in maritime security operations, ensuring safe passage for naval and merchant vessels, executing counter-piracy missions, and providing missile defense for naval groups. By the mid-2000s, in response to threats from nations like North Korea, many Arleigh Burke-class destroyers underwent significant enhancements to their Aegis combat systems, strengthening their capability to detect, track, and neutralize inbound ballistic missiles. This transformation solidified their position as the basis of America's naval BMD strategy, with strategic deployments in areas like the Sea of Japan and the Eastern Mediterranean. Building on this momentum, the late 2010s saw the Flight 3 upgrade, introducing the advanced Spy-6 radar system, further amplifying their capacity to detect and counter modern threats, including hypersonic missiles. Global conflict's ever-changing nature means these ships are crucial for preserving maritime freedom. Continuously patrolling international waters, they have actively engaged in several global naval exercises like RIMPAC, the trilateral Malabar exercises with India and Japan, and the Baltops in the Baltic region. The future of the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer will be influenced by evolving threats, technological advances, and shifting operational requirements. To maintain its edge, the current fleet undergoes continuous upgrades, incorporating new technologies. Additionally, the Navy is exploring fresh technologies and strategies to further redefine the class's capabilities, including innovations such as unmanned systems and unique weapon types. Despite all these major evolutions in the Arleigh Burke design, all ships in the class maintain a certain level of commonality and interoperability, which is one of the reasons the class has been so successful and has remained in production for so long. Arleigh Burke, the first of her class, spent her first 30 years of service in Norfolk, Virginia, and was relocated to Rota, Spain in March 2021, where she's forward deployed for the Europe-based US 6th Fleet. After more than 3 decades of service, and close to reaching the end of her expected 35-year service life in 2023, the first of its class appeared likely ready to retire. But in March of that same year, the Naval Surface Force Atlantic announced that the Arleigh Burke would continue protecting the seas, at least through 2031, when the ship turns 40 years old. This longevity will be achieved through a modernization program that will provide midlife upgrades, ensuring the entire class can remain in action for longer. Months later, the Navy announced that other fellow Arleigh Burke-class ships were set for extensions in various capacities, including USS Ramage, USS Benfold, USS Mitcher, and USS Milius. This extension puts each destroyer beyond its estimated service life of 35 years. With over 90 commissioned ships and counting, the Arleigh Burke class represents the largest group of destroyers in the Navy, overshadowing other contemporary naval platforms in sheer numbers. Also, in the summer of 2023, the U.S. Navy announced a pair of multi-year procurement contracts for new Arleigh Burke-class destroyers to be acquired in the late 2020s. The contracts also include options for additional ships, should they be funded in future defense budgets. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers are an undeniable success and one of the most victorious shipbuilding programs in the history of the Navy. With its ongoing upgrades and improvements, it's expected to remain a vital and relevant component of the American surface fleet amidst a rapidly evolving security environment. The end of the class, or at least the beginning of its end, will likely come with the Large Surface Combatant Program, a new class of destroyers slated to take on the roles currently performed by older Arleigh Burke destroyers and Ticonderoga-class cruisers. But the program is still in very early development, and it seems for years to come, Arleigh Burke, the most produced ship class in America since World War II, will continue. According to Captain Casey Moten, former DDG-51 class program manager, quote, "The versatility and adaptability of the DDG-51 class continue to enable our fleet to address the wide range of missions and 21st century threats."